Hey, people who love to read scary stories, and you other people out there who love to write scary stories. I made a sick new website at lostvoid.app that will officially launch this month, but you can check it out now and submit your stories for our waitlist. It's an exciting new place where you can share your best creepypasta, and readers can enjoy terrifying tales and vote on their favorites. In fact, we'll be holding a contest soon with a $500 first place prize. So go to lostvoid.app and submit your scariest story, or read a few of my own samples. Link in the description. Tonight, my dear coffee addicts, I've got several scary and allegedly true work stories for you about horrific murders, disturbing night shifts, and more. You won't want to miss this first story. Wink wink. Be sure to send me your scary and true work stories at eeriecast.com/submit. And stop what you're doing right now, rate and follow Tales from the Break Room on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to Darkness Prevails on YouTube. Thank you. These are Tales from the Break Room. Mrs. Dubowski's Lawn, from Eagle Thigh. That summer I was 15. You know, that weird age where you're basically useless for real work, but desperately need cash for stupid crap your parents won't buy you. That was me. I was obsessed with getting some PlayStation 2 game. Heck, if I can even remember which one it was. I was obsessed with both GameCube and PlayStation 2 at the time. It's crazy how you forget that stuff that seemed so important back then. So what I did was started mowing lawns around town. We lived in one of those nothing special towns in upstate New York, where people actually knew their neighbors and nobody locked anything up. I charged $20 for a normal yard. Maybe 25 if it was huge. Dad let me borrow his crappy old mower and I'd drag the thing around in our beat-up wagon like some kind of suburban hobo. Most of my customers were pretty standard people. There was this one family who didn't need their grass cut half the time but liked things just so. And I remember this little old man who would literally watch me the entire time from his porch, making these little gestures whenever I missed a spot. And a woman I called Mrs. G, who would slip me an extra $5 to deal with her dandelions. One summer I picked up Mrs. Dubowski. I started to cut her grass in June. She had this place, one of those old houses with a really long driveway. The yard was huge, mostly in the front, and the house was a washed-out yellow color with dark green shutters that had seen way better days. It wasn't a dump, per se, but it was certainly easy to tell how old it was. Here's the thing about Mrs. Dubowski. She never said a word, never talked at all, not the whole summer that I knew her. The lady was probably 60-something, short, and she always had her gray hair pulled back super tight. Whenever I'd knock on her door to let her know I was starting, she would open the door, give me this sweet little smile, and nod. That's it. But she was nice, you know. After that first time, she started to bring out these trays with lemonade and weird European cookies, these flat, crunchy things covered in powdered sugar that got all over you. She'd leave them on the porch rail, smile, then disappear back inside. It became our thing. Sometimes she'd bring cookies, sometimes cut up fruit. One time she brought out homemade pierogies that were still steaming. Those were incredible. It didn't take long for her to become my favorite place to cut grass. Regarding her silence, I just assumed her English was terrible. We had a bunch of Eastern European families in town, so that's fine by me. But the bad part was the guys who would show up. So I would do her place every other Thursday afternoon. Usually it was just her and her silent smiles, but sometimes, maybe 4 or 5 times that summer, there would be this massive black Silverado in her driveway. One of those jacked up trucks with windows so tinted dark you couldn't see crap through them. And with the truck, there would be these guys at her house. They were the same type of guys. Big dude, usually blonde, built like they lived at the gym. They would talk to each other in Russian or Polish or something. Harsh-sounding words that made everything sound like an argument, even when it probably wasn't. Whenever I was there, they would watch me like a hawk, and I never knew why. The first time it happened, I was doing the edges along the driveway, when one of them came out on the porch. This guy just stood there, arms crossed, and stared at me. He didn't say anything, and didn't even move, but he watched me like I was an intruder that shouldn't be there. I felt like he was sizing me up for a coffin. Creeped me the heck out. I went into turbo mode to finish that day. Every time they were there, it was the same kind of deal. They would come out, light up their cigarettes, and just stare at me. And the more it happened, the less this felt like normal people watching. Made you feel anxious and nervous, hyper aware of every little move you made. Kind of like when you know you're on camera and you're trying not to be awkward. Mrs. Dubowski never came out when they were there, so there would be no cookies and no lemonade on those days. Maybe she was as scared of them as I was. I was starting to think that maybe I should get a different lawn to cut on those days, but then I thought about the way she would leave $30 in an envelope under her brick door, even though the job didn't cost that much, and about how the creepy brigade wasn't there. It was perfectly fine, easy money. So I convinced myself to keep coming back. The last time I ever went there, I arrived at 2 like I always did. There was no truck there that day. Everything looked normal. But when I went to knock on the door to let her know I was starting, the door was already open. Not all the way, but cracked open maybe half a foot. I knocked anyway, then called out, "Mrs. Dubowski? It's me, here to do the lawn." I didn't hear her reply. I knocked harder and swung the door open more. The inside was dark, and all the curtains pulled shut, even though it was bright as heck outside. "Hello? Mrs. Dubowski?" Still nothing. I pushed the door open wider and leaned in. I could see the living room, couch, coffee table, big bookcase. Everything was all dim and quiet. "Mrs. Dubowski, are you all right? Your door's open." It was that kind of extremely creepy silence, like exploring the local abandoned building alone. I guess I kind of was at the time. I stepped inside and fumbled for the light switch. I found it and flicked it, but nothing happened. The power must have been out. I took another step in and waited for my eyes to adjust, and I suddenly stepped on something, wet and slippery. My shoe skidded forward, and whatever it was made this horrible sliding sound across the floor. I almost ate crap and had to grab the door frame to stay upright. "Crap," I said out loud. I couldn't see what it was in the dark. I figured she'd dropped something, maybe got sick and had to leave for the hospital in a rush. That would explain the door. But what about the power? I felt so bad for Mrs. Dubowski. She was an old woman living alone and all that. She probably forgot to pay the electric bill. I decided to just do the lawn and come back to lock up after. It seemed like the neighborly thing, and if she really had been sick that day, I wasn't going to charge her. She'd been so nice to me after all. The next 2 hours were business as usual. A hot sun, a loud mower, and the same old routine. I kept looking at the house, hoping to see her car pull up or her walking outside, but it never happened. When I finished up, I went right back to the house. The door was still open and it was still dark. I stepped up to the entryway. "Mrs. Dubowski, if you're here, I did your lawn. I'm gonna close up your house for you, okay?" I reached for the light switch again, just automatically. This time it worked. The lights blazing on made me squint. I guessed whatever electrical thing it was had fixed itself. Is that even a thing? I was a dumb kid, so that was my best guess. My eyes adjusted and I looked around to make sure everything was cool before locking up. But then I saw it. There on the floor, smeared and dragged from where I'd slipped on it. A piece of pale, wet-looking flesh. My brain kept trying to make it something else. Raw meat from the kitchen, a kind of mask, a prop, anything but what it actually was. It had hair on it, gray hair. There were dark spots on it, and the shape, even torn up and stretched out, you could tell what it was supposed to be. It was a face. Someone had cut off a face. I saw the birthmark near what would have been the left cheek. It was the same one I'd been seeing every other Thursday. It was her, Mrs. Dubowski's face, on the floor, and I'd stepped and slipped right on it. My whole world went sideways, my stomach flipping into several different knots. The room spun, and I stumbled back through the door and kept backing up until I hit the porch railing. My entire body would not stop shaking. I ran as fast as I could with no plan and no other thought. I ran because I thought I had to get away, that whoever did that was still nearby, because they wouldn't want that to be found, would they? I ran down the driveway into the street all the way home. I told my parents and the cops were called. They went to Mrs. Dubowski's house. Apparently, Mrs. Dubowski had a basement, and that's where they found her. It was very clear it was a murder. The bad kind. Personal and vicious. I remember thinking it was the kind of thing that was not supposed to happen in boring little towns. And one of the hardest aspects to move on from this was that they never caught anyone. Those blonde men, the truck, they were gone like they never existed. I stopped mowing lawns for the remainder of my childhood. I couldn't even look at someone mowing their own lawn without wanting to throw up. My mind ran away with itself, trying to figure out why those men would do that to her. Because I was so certain it was them, it had to be. Why would they want to do that to an old woman? If they hated her so much and had to kill her, why do that to her? And I had stepped right on her face. To this very day, I feel as though I can't be forgiven for that. Like I desecrated her body and her very soul, and I didn't know it. I hear that sound, that wet flesh sliding across the floor, squelching underfoot. I hear it in my dreams and wake up sweating. I try my best to forget that I spent 2 hours mowing her grass while her face was just lying there on the floor. And I'd stepped right on it. Lifeguard Creep, from Wendigo Fan 927. I'm a 15-year-old guy. I used to be on the swim team, and some of the guys there said I should get a job as a lifeguard. One interview later and a week of training, I got a job at my local YMCA. The first couple of days were great. Everybody was so nice, and the job was easy enough, and you always got to meet new people. That fun, however, ended when I had my first shift with this one guy. He was short, thin, and blonde, and the biggest nerd I've ever seen. For the sake of his privacy, we'll call him Jack. Jack was openly bisexual. Being the dude I was, I didn't really care. As long as he knew I was straight, I was fine. I even introduced myself jokingly as the gayest straight man you'll ever see. However, he didn't laugh at that. Every time he and I shared a shift, I would catch him staring at me. When I was trying to go on break, he would always walk up to me and talk about anime. He knew I liked it because of his spying on me while I watched it on my breaks. He clearly liked me, despite my constant ignoring of him. One day I was waiting for my bus. It was pretty dark out, and I was on the phone with my girlfriend, Em. She was checking up on me on the phone and asked how work was that day. I told her that work was work. You sit in a hot, humid room all day, telling kids not to run. I then asked how her work was. She basically said the usual, just fries and fatties. We both laughed at that. I was about to reply back when Jack, of all people, walked out behind me. He started to try to talk to me, but I wasn't listening. I was smiling and nodding while listening to him talk, trying not to be too rude. My bus pulled up, and before I could even get on, he managed to grab my phone. He then pushed me back and immediately ran on the bus, talking to him through my phone. Now, I was a tall and athletic guy. I ran right after him, demanding that he give my phone back. That little creep, after stealing my phone, had told my girlfriend we were done and that he was my new boyfriend. What in the world? I was beyond ticked off, and after managing to wrestle my phone back, I clocked him in the face. He shouted, "What the heck, dude? You'll be sorry for this. I've got a knife at home and I'll cut you up tomorrow." I hadn't expected such anger from him. I mean, he had started this. Did this really warrant a death threat? I froze at his words. This was really happening. The kid was threatening my life because he stole my phone and I took it back. In that moment, he suddenly decided he wanted to fight me. My girlfriend was still on the phone. That's when he lunged, trying to steal the phone again. This went on for about 10 minutes. During that time, I decided to record the entire thing. He kept screaming about how he was going to kill me and my slutty girlfriend. Then he stood up and ran out the door to his stop. That was it. The next day at school, I got called down to the principal's office. There sat that little turd and his angry mom. "Please sit, Mr. W," the principal told me, clearly annoyed. He then went on to state that it was wrong to abuse a significant other like that. "What are you even talking about?" Then Jack spoke up. "Don't play dumb, we were dating and you know it. You tried to get with me last night," Jack said. I was dumbfounded. This dude stole my phone, tried to make me break up with my girlfriend, and decided to say we were dating? This kid was completely insane. I explained my side and used the recording as proof. They even called him down to the office. Jack was suspended on the spot, and they fired him from the lifeguarding position. I still work there. Occasionally, I do wonder. Jack was so unhinged. What if he had followed through with his threat? The Things We Don't Talk About, from ACO Jenkins. Before I can tell you these stories about being an animal control officer, I've got to tell you about my childhood first. You'll understand why in a minute. I was 7 years old, living in a quiet suburb outside of Akron. My best friend lived 3 houses down, and between our homes was old Mrs. Barley's place. She had a pit bull mix named Duke. A massive thing, really. Had to be at least 90 pounds, with a deep bark that would rattle your bones from across the road. One summer afternoon, I was riding my bike home from my friend's place. I'd made that trip plenty of times before, and I never thought twice about it. But that day, Mrs. Barley's gate was wide open. I didn't see it at first. I was just happily pedaling along, probably humming some anime theme song, when Duke came around the corner of her house at full sprint. I froze up. I just stopped pedaling and planted my feet on the ground, straddling my bike. But Duke didn't slow down at all. That dog hit me like a freight train. I remember the impact, the bike clattering to the pavement, and then the teeth. Not biting, but just there, right in my face, hot breath, saliva, the white of his gums. Duke had quickly pinned me to the ground, standing over me and snarling. If anything, he was about to bite. I couldn't move, and I was too scared to scream. So I lay there staring up at this animal that now seemed 10 times bigger than me. Mrs. Barley came running out, screaming Duke's name. He backed off immediately, tail wagging like he wasn't just about to chew me in half. She apologized over and over, even cried, saying that he had never done anything like that before. I ran home alongside my bike and told my parents everything. They filed a report, but nothing happened. Duke was just being a dog, they said. Protecting his territory, no real harm done. But I never stopped thinking about that moment. For years after that, I couldn't be around dogs. It made my stomach drop. Hands would shake, breath would catch. I'd cross the street if I saw someone walking their pet. My parents got me in therapy for a while. It helped, and slowly I learned to be around dogs again. Eventually, I could even pet them without that old panic rising up. By the time I was an adult, the fear had been conquered. That's why becoming an animal control officer felt right. Maybe I could help prevent another kid ending up in that kind of situation. Working for animal control, I worked with dogs every single day. Aggressive ones, scared ones, sick ones. I'd even been bitten twice on the job. But it never brought back that old fear. I was past it. And I was dead wrong. Now on to the experience. It was a Tuesday morning in late September. Dispatch called me at 6:47 a.m. Someone's neighbors had reported hearing screaming from a residence, followed by silence. Police were en route, but they'd heard dogs barking aggressively and requested animal control on standby. The usual procedure. I pulled up to a small ranch house with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. 2 squad cars were already there. One of the officers was standing by his cruiser, face pale and talking into his radio. He took one glance at me and walked over quick. Hey, we need you to handle the dogs in there first," he said. He sounded concerned. "We can't get in there until the dogs are secured." "How many?" I asked. "That we know of? 3 pit bulls. They're in the back bedroom." I shrugged away a bit of memory, that one I get when I see pit bulls, because Duke was a pit bull mix. But I wasn't afraid of dogs anymore, so I grabbed my catch pole and protective gear. One of the other officers met me at the door. This one was a younger guy, maybe in his mid-20s, and rather than being pale, he looked gray. "You good?" I asked. He nodded but didn't say a word. Inside, the house was dim and the curtains were drawn. All the lights were off. And the air smelled bad. I figured I was about to find at least one of these dogs dead and partially rotted. I began walking. I could hear them before I saw them. It wasn't barking, but a very low and continuous possessive growl, like a dog guarding his bowl of kibble. We moved down the hallway. The younger officer was in front of me, leading the way. At the end, the bedroom door was already open. The young officer stopped at the threshold, and I stepped up beside him. And then I saw her. This isn't her real name, for obvious reasons, but I'll call her Mrs. Hutchins. Mrs. Hutchins, 73 years old, was in her room, but in that moment, I could not tell her age, and I could barely identify her. She was on the floor beside her bed, and the 3 pit bulls were on her. They weren't attacking anybody. They were eating. The largest one, a brindle male, had his muzzle buried in her abdomen. The other 2, both females, were at her legs and shoulder. They weren't in a frenzy. They were methodical, calm, like they were just having some breakfast. They looked right up when I entered the room. 3 pairs of eyes locked on us. Their muzzles were dark, soaked with blood. The brindle's face was almost black with it. And just like that, I was 7 years old again. My hand started to shake. The catch pole felt really, really heavy, and my vision began to tunnel. All I could see were those eyes and those teeth. Duke's teeth, his hot breath, the weight of him on my chest. I couldn't breathe. The officer was saying something beside me, but it sounded distant. The dogs hadn't moved yet. They were just watching or waiting. Then the brindle stood up, real slow. He was a massive one, maybe 70 pounds, thick-chested and muscular. He took one step towards us, then another. Blood dripped from his jaws onto the carpet. I should have done my job and raised that catch pole. but instead I was petrified. That old terror had me locked in place with every muscle seizing up. "Jenkins," the officer said. "Jenkins, we need to move now." The dog took another step. His eyes never left mine. Behind him, one of the females started growling again. Not at us. At him, like she was warning him not to leave her. Something in that sound broke the spell. The way it was so possessive, I was suddenly reminded that this wasn't about me. This was about a poor old woman who had died alone with her own pets. This was about a job that had to be done. I raised the catchpole. My hands were trembling, but even so, I raised it. "Easy," I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking. "Easy, boy." The brindle stopped. His ears went back, but he stopped. What happened next took 3 hours. 3 hours to safely secure those dogs, get them into the van, and process the scene. All the while, I was supposed to maintain composure, but every instinct in my body was screaming at me to go home. The female officers who processed Mrs. Hutchins' body were professionals. They didn't speak much and didn't need to. The investigation revealed that Mrs. Hutchins had died of a heart attack. Natural causes. The dogs had simply been hungry. Locked in that room with her body for almost 18 hours, they did what animals do. But I couldn't shake it. I wasn't going to get that image of 3 faces, bloodied, looking up at me, out of my head. I had to take a week off work. I told my supervisor I needed some time. I think he understood the moment he saw my face when I came back. When my vacation was over, I thought about quitting the job, finding something else to do, but I stayed, maybe out of stubbornness, maybe out of need to prove I could handle it. This brings me to the second story, and it was only about 3 or so months after the last one. I got another call, and it tested me in a completely different way. This one involved a welfare check. There was an elderly man who lived alone, and his neighbors reported not seeing him in or out of the house for several days. His 17 cats were reportedly making noises. 17. And this guy only lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. I'd handled hoarding situations before. They're sad but manageable. Mostly I was just thinking, how do you fit 17 cats in a 2-bedroom apartment? When I arrived, the apartment manager let me in. That smell hit me first. Typical cat hoarder smell. Ammonia, waste, decay. I'd smelled worse before. But the cats in that place acted wrong. They weren't scattered around the apartment, but rather arranged. All 17 of them, and I counted, were sitting, positioned throughout the living room in a perfect semicircle, all facing the hallway that led to the bedroom. They weren't moving or making any noise at all, but just sitting there and staring down that hallway. I called out the man's name. There was no reply. I then carefully stepped into the living room. Not one of those cats looked at me. Their eyes were fixed on that hallway, unblinking. Some of them were so still I thought they were dead or statues, but then I could see their sides moving. They were alive. They were breathing, but they were waiting for something. The apartment manager stayed by the door. Smart man. He wasn't the one that chose animal control for his profession. I moved toward the hallway. As I got closer, 2 of the cats, a tabby and a black shorthair, stood up in perfect unison. I thought they were going to look at me or acknowledge me, but no. They seemed to get in front of me, like they were blocking my path. They positioned themselves in front of the hallway entrance side by side. They weren't hissing or arching their backs, just standing in the way. So I decided to talk to them softly. "It's okay, I'm just checking on your owner." I stepped around them. They didn't stop me, but they did keep careful watch. Both of their heads swiveled to track my movement. The hallway was dark, so I flicked on the hallway light. At the end of the hall was the bedroom door. This situation felt very familiar, and I was starting to get a nervous stomach. The door was closed, but at the base of the door I could see more. 4 more cats sitting and staring at that door, completely motionless. Then a sound came from inside the bedroom. It wasn't the owner. This sounded like a droning hum, like a generator running, or kind of like purring, collective purring. And something about the sound filled me with absolute terror. It's hard to explain. Have you ever heard those stories of black-eyed children that just looking at them or being around them fills the person with dread? That's how I felt. I had no real reason to be so terrified of these cats or that sound, but I felt in that moment like Satan was about to pop through the door. It was some kind of feeling I've never had before, like it was clawing at the most primal part of my brain. I began to back up then, slowly. The 4 cats at the bedroom door didn't move at all, and the 2 in the hallway stayed perfectly still. As I retreated to the living room, the semicircle of cats remained frozen, 17 sets of eyes, all fixed on that hallway, still waiting. I remember thinking, I was told he had 17 cats, but with those 4 at the end of the hallway, that would be 21. I went outside and called it in, telling dispatch I needed some police help for the welfare check, and said that I felt sick to my stomach. If I explained what was making me feel sick, I likely would be laughed at for the rest of my days. I waited outside until the police arrived. When they got there, we went in again. The cats had moved this time. They were scattered now, behaving like normal cats. Some eating, some sleeping, some grooming each other. It was a breath of fresh cat pee. The owner was in the bedroom when we got there, all in one piece, but dead. Natural causes is all I heard. He'd been dead for 4 days. Luckily for me, I never had to go back into that apartment. They were able to get someone else to handle the cat removal. I'm still in animal control at the moment. When things are normal, and 99% of the time they are normal, it's a good job. I enjoy it. But there are 2 things that I take away from these stories, these experiences I've had so far. Firstly, just because a dog acts like your best friend doesn't mean the both of you aren't animals. Just as if your plane crashes in the mountains and you're a survivor, among others, you might starve enough to start thinking about eating each other. Dogs too will do what they can to survive a desperate situation. Secondly, some things are just nonsensical, like the way birds know when a disaster is about to happen, so they up and leave way before humans have even the slightest idea. That's how I cope with the cat story. I got caught up in cat shenanigans, and I wasn't supposed to be there. And they were nice about it, bless their souls, but I'd rather not intrude on the cat rituals again. But those are my animal control stories, for now, but I do hope they're the last. The Hoffman Kids. From Anon. My mom still asks me why I won't babysit her friends' grandkids. 20-something years later, and I still can't give her a straight answer. How do you explain that one night in 1994 ruined it forever? Back then, $40 for 5 hours of babysitting was incredible money for a 17-year-old in suburban Ohio. That's what the Hoffmans offered, and I jumped at the opportunity. Most families paid $15 or $20 for a whole evening, but the Hoffmans lived out past the subdivisions, where the house is set on bigger lots and you had to drive by cornfields just to get there. She said the extra money was for the inconvenience. It really should have been my first clue that something was off. Nobody overpays teenagers without a good reason. Mrs. Hoffman had gotten my number through someone at the hospital where she just started nursing school. Friday nights were her clinical rotations, and her husband, Dale, worked second shift at the Ford plant. They needed someone reliable for their 2 kids. Amber was 8. She was such a serious little girl who spent hours drawing pictures at the kitchen table. Tanner had just turned 5 and basically lived in front of their Super Nintendo. The easiest kids I'd ever watched. I remember that Friday. Mrs. Hoffman met me at the door looking frazzled. Her scrub top was inside out. She didn't even notice until I pointed it out, then laughed nervously, saying she would fix it in the car. She ran through everything so fast I had to ask her to repeat the bedtime routine. At 9 o'clock, brush teeth. Tanner needs his dinosaur nightlight. Amber reads for 15 minutes, then lights out. "The phone rings a lot," she said, pausing at the door with her purse. "Just let the machine get it, okay?" "You don't want me to answer?" "No, never. Just let the machine get it." Their house was a split level that probably looked modern in 1976. Wood paneling covered the living room walls. The kitchen had harvest gold appliances and dark brown cabinets. But no family photos. I babysat for probably 8 different families that year, and the Hoffmans were the only ones without a single picture on display. Even the Jacksons, who were minimalists before that was even a thing, had their kids' school photos stuck to the fridge. The answering machine sat on the kitchen counter. It was just a big chunky beige box with a cassette tape inside. That first night it went off 6 times. 4 rings, then, "You've reached the Hoffmans, leave a message." But nobody ever did. I would hear someone breathing, maybe some background noise like traffic or a TV, then click. Amber didn't seem to notice. She sat at the kitchen table with her big box of 64 Crayolas, the one with the built-in sharpener, drawing houses. Always houses. Sometimes they were normal, square with a triangle roof, smoke curling from the chimney. But sometimes she'd color all the windows black, or draw them with bars, or add multiple locks on the doors. I said once, "That's a lot of locks." And she said, without looking up at me, "It keeps the bad people out." I asked her, "Are there bad people around here?" She shrugged and kept coloring. Tanner was easier to figure out. He'd park himself in front of the TV with Donkey Kong Country and play the same levels over and over. He knew that infinite life glitch at the start of the game. Even though he was a pro, he could do all the minecart levels without dying once. When he got frustrated, he would throw the controller, but not too hard. Just a little toss under the carpet. Then he would pick it up and start again. Mrs. Hoffman always looked exhausted when she got home. She'd count out my money with shaky hands, always adding an extra 5 or 10 for gas, even though I lived only 10 minutes away. She'd ask if everything went okay, if the kids were good, if anyone had called. The last question always came with this look, concern or something else. Dale was never home when I arrived at 6:30, and was always still gone by the time Mrs. Hoffman returned around midnight. But I did find evidence of him being there, like fresh cigarette butts in the heavy glass ashtray by the recliner, still smoldering sometimes, as well as work boots moved from the mat by the door to the middle of the living room, leaving little dirt clumps on the carpet. And that cologne smell too. Dracar Noir, I think, hanging in the hallway like he had just walked through. One early fall night, I found a hole punched in the wall behind the bathroom door. Fresh, too. The drywall dust was still on the floor. When Mrs. Hoffman came home, she saw me notice it. Dale's been stressed at work. Ford's been talking about layoffs." The kids never mentioned their dad directly, but Tanner started having nightmares, too, always about the man in the downstairs closet. The thing was, they didn't have a closet downstairs, just a basement door with a padlock on it. Mrs. Hoffman said Dale kept tools down there, dangerous stuff the kids should not be around. But neither kid would walk past that door. They would go through the dining room to get to the kitchen rather than take the direct route past the basement. By November, things were getting stranger. I'd put something down, my textbook, a glass of water, the TV remote, and I would find it moved when I came back. Not too far, but shifted. like someone had picked it up and put it back down. Once I made Tanner a peanut butter sandwich, and I went to get him a juice. When I came back, I found the sandwich on the opposite counter. Tanner swore he hadn't touched it. The phone calls got worse too. Instead of just breathing, sometimes I'd hear a man's voice, muffled and angry. He would be talking to someone else wherever he was calling from.
"She thinks she's so freaking smart,"
I heard once. Another time,
"I know where they are."
Mrs. Hoffman started to come home later. Midnight became 12:30, then 1 a.m. She would apologize and blame her clinical instructor and hand me extra 20s. The circles under her eyes got so dark they looked like bruises. Maybe they were bruises, but I didn't ask. One Friday after Thanksgiving, I arrived to find Mrs. Hoffman crying in her car in the driveway. She saw me pull up and quickly wiped her face, trying to smile. Inside, there were 2 suitcases by the door. "Just in case we need to visit my sister," she said when she saw me. "She's been sick." But Amber later told me they didn't have an aunt. "Mommy doesn't have a sister. She said so when I asked if I could have one." That night, both the kids were very clingy. Tanner wanted me to sit with him while he played Nintendo. Amber asked if I could stay in her room until she fell asleep. Around 10 o'clock, I heard a car drive by slowly. Then 15 minutes later, again. I looked out the window but could only see headlights creeping past. Mrs. Hoffman didn't get home until 2 a.m. She looked terrible. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her hair was coming out of its ponytail, and her hands shook so bad she dropped her keys twice. She gave me $80 and asked if I could come tomorrow night too, Saturday. This was unusual, but the money was good. "Dale's working overtime," she said, but something in her voice told me that was a lie. 2 Fridays before Christmas, she paid me in advance. The first time she'd ever done that. Counted out $60 with trembling fingers and said she would be home really late, maybe as late as 3 in the morning. When she handed me the money, I saw bruises on her wrist, 4 little ovals like fingerprints. Then she grabbed my arm, not too hard but desperate. "If anyone comes by, anyone at all, don't let them in, even if they say they're family. Mrs. Hoffman, are you a— Promise me nobody comes in this house." I promised. She left looking like she was going to her own execution. Amber barely touched her spaghetti that night. She sat at the table drawing a house with all the windows boarded up. And Tanner didn't even want to play games. He just sat on the couch holding his stuffed T-Rex and watching the door. "Is Daddy coming home?" he asked. "I don't know, buddy. Why?" "He came home last time when Mommy was at school, and he was really mad." "When was this?" "I don't know. Before. He broke stuff." Amber looked up from her drawing then. "Mommy said he went away." "He did," Tanner said, "but he came back." They both went to bed at 8 without me even mentioning bedtime. The house felt so strange with them upstairs, and all too quiet. The phone hadn't rung once, which was somehow worse than the constant calling I'd gotten used to. I was halfway through my AP history notes when I heard tires on gravel around 10 o'clock. Way too early for Mrs. Hoffman. The car parked somewhere beyond the porch light's reach. A door slammed, and I heard footsteps on the porch. Heavy footsteps. Someone then tried the doorknob. I'd locked it, obviously. The knob rattled harder, though. Then it stopped. After that, there came some soft knocking. 3 taps. "Kids, Daddy's home." The voice was thick and slurred, and I could smell it almost instantly after the knock. It was like whiskey mixed with that Drakkar cologne. More pounding came, harder now. "Amber! Tanner, open the freaking door!" I heard footsteps upstairs. One of the kids was awake. "Stay in your room!" I shouted. The pounding stopped. For a second, I thought he'd given up. Then I heard glass shatter in the kitchen. I ran in to see an arm reaching through the broken window over the sink, fumbling for the lock. Blood ran down from where he'd cut himself on the glass. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911.
911, what's your emergency?
Someone's breaking into the house. I then gave them the address. The back door crashed open. Dale stood there, unshaven, his work jacket stained with blood from his arm and something else, something darker on his chest. His eyes were wild and unfocused. "Who the hell are you?" he shouted. "The police are coming," I said. He laughed, but it sounded more like choking. "Good. Tell them Dale Hoffman wants his freaking kids back." He had what looked like a hunting knife in his hand, the curved kind with a serrated edge near the handle, and there was blood already on it. Not from his arm. It looked a little older. Amber appeared at the top of the stairs with her stuffed rabbit. "Hey, baby girl," Dale said, his voice shifting to something artificially sweet. "Daddy missed you so much." "Mommy said you went away." "Mommy's a liar who's trying to keep us apart." I heard the sirens now getting closer. Dale heard them too. His face changed and the fake sweetness vanished. "Come on, both of you. We're leaving now." Amber didn't move. "No." "Get the hell down here!" He took the stairs 2 at a time. I grabbed the heavy glass ashtray from the side table, 3 pounds of solid crystal, and brought it down on his skull as hard as I could. The sound it made was wet. He went down the stairs backwards, knife clattering away, and he didn't get up. Blood pooled under his head, mixing with the blood from his arm. His eyes were open but losing focus. He was breathing, but it sounded ragged. The cops arrived only a couple minutes later, then an ambulance. While the paramedics worked on Dale, the cops searched his truck. They found a loaded .38 under the seat, rope and duct tape in a duffel bag, a manila folder full of photos, pictures of the house from different angles, pictures of Amber, Mrs. Hoffman, even of me, taken from the cornfield across the road. There was also a bloody purse in the truck. It belonged to Mrs. Hoffman. They found her at the hospital, in her car in the parking garage. She had been stabbed twice but had managed to drive herself there. She lived, barely. Dale had waited for her shift to end, thinking for some reason she would have the kids with her. Mrs. Hoffman showed up at the house while they were loading Dale into the ambulance. She had apparently discharged herself against medical advice, and she looked a mess. She didn't act shocked. She stood there looking hollow instead. "I'm so sorry. We left Pittsburgh to get away from him, then Indianapolis, then here, and he found us every time. I thought maybe if I changed our last name." She paid me for the full night plus another 100. Her hands were trembling as she counted bills from her wallet. I didn't want to take it, but I did, and I never went back there. Took a break from babysitting for a while too. I got a job working at a record store for a while until they went under. As for Dale, he got 15 years for attempted murder. He served 8. Mrs. Hoffman took the kids and disappeared completely. Not even my mom, who knew everyone's business in town, could figure out where they went. So it was a nice surprise when I ran into Amber at a grocery store only 5 years ago. She was with her own kids, 2 little boys racing around the cart. She saw me in the cereal aisle, and we both just stopped. She looked healthy and normal. She was wearing a wedding ring, and after a second she smiled and said to me, "Thank you." And that was it. Her kids were getting impatient and she had to go, but I knew what she was saying. But I'm not really someone to be thanked. I simply did what I had to. In that moment, though, in my head, I was more scared than I had ever been in my life. The Night Shift. From GRM. My mom got sick 2 years ago. Cancer, the aggressive kind that doesn't give you time to prepare. I dropped out of college in my final semester to take care of her. I used up my savings on medical bills that insurance would not cover. She fought hard for 8 months before she passed. By then, I had nothing left. No degree, no savings, no job prospects that didn't require the credentials I'd abandoned. The gas station job I got came through a friend of a friend, a run-down place about 15 miles outside of town, where the road cuts through nothing but pine forest and the occasional farmhouse. The pay was terrible, but it came with overnight shifts that nobody wanted, which meant I could work alone and didn't have to pretend to be okay around other people. The place is as bad as you think it might be. Half the lights wouldn't come on when you flicked the light switch, and the owner would not replace them. And it had these floors that no matter what I did just wouldn't come clean. And there was a smell to the place, like old coffee and cleaning supplies. There were 2 gas pumps out front, both ancient. A cooler section with drinks that didn't really stay quite cold. Shelves of chips and candy that probably predated my employment. But it was quiet. Most nights, I'd get maybe a dozen customers between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. A lot of truckers, mostly. There would be the occasional lost tourist. Sometimes the local cops would stop by for coffee, but that's about it. For the first 2 weeks, it was exactly what I needed. Just mindless work, time to think, time to grieve without anyone asking if I was okay. I did not expect what happened next. I was restocking shelves one day and I heard the door chime. I quickly poked my head up and saw no one. On another occasion, I was sweeping up things and the lights in the back room began to flicker. Then one night I was counting the register and I felt like someone was standing just behind me, close enough that I swear I heard breathing. These were sort of small experiences, but they added up, making me a little bit wary of the place. I blamed it on being tired, working overnight, and I wasn't sleeping very good. Grief does that to you. But then the bathroom incident happened. On a Thursday night around 2 a.m., it was dead quiet. I hadn't seen a customer for at least an hour. I was drinking too much coffee to stay awake, and before long I had to go to the bathroom. I left the register, walked to the back, and locked myself in the single-employee restroom. I was only in there maybe 3 minutes. When I came out, the entire station had gone dark. And I mean everything, not just overhead lights, but coolers, the coffee maker, the register display, the outside lights, pump lights too. Complete darkness. The only light came from the Coke machine's logo, but it made everything have a red glow to it. Honestly, I stood there a bit creeped out in the doorway of the bathroom. I still had my hand on the handle. I was thinking, was it a breaker, or do I need to call someone? When I noticed the figure. There was someone standing outside, pressed against the glass front door. They were standing there completely still, but I could see the human-like silhouette. They were tall and skinny, their head leaning a bit forward, as if trying to get a better look inside. My heart began to quicken in pace. I couldn't move, or I didn't want to, and I didn't call out. I stood there as well, staring at this shape pressed against the glass. Then, slowly, it raised one hand and placed it flat against the door. Their fingers were emaciated, thin and bony. I could see that even in this darkness. They reminded me more of spider legs rather than human fingers. I'm not sure how long I stood there watching this strange figure. Maybe it was 10 seconds, a minute, I don't know. But then, all at once, the lights came back on. Just one big sudden click from somewhere, and the coolers, the lights, everything lit back up. But in that same instant, The figure that was at the door was gone. I took the opportunity to run to the door, unlock it, and push it open. There was no one outside. The parking lot was empty and the road was barren. Nobody. Apparently, it had started raining at some point, but I didn't notice till now. Just a weird customer who stopped by and thought we were closed because of the power outage, I told myself. It was a creepy enough experience that I did consider quitting. I spent the rest of the shift composing a text to my manager, in fact. But when the sun came up and the morning shift guy arrived, it felt more distant. The place felt more safe. The experience felt more like something I'd imagined in the dead hours, when your brain just isn't working right. So I stayed on board. Another incident happened a week later. Another slow night, this time around 3 a.m. I was standing behind the register, scrolling through my phone, when I saw movement through the window. Not close up like before. This was a bit distant. But I could tell there was someone walking along the road. Out in the middle of nowhere where no one walks because there's nothing to walk to and no sidewalks to walk on. Just some person moving along the shoulder of the road, heading westward. I kept a close eye on them as they approached. They were maybe a quarter-mile away when I first noticed them. A dark shape against a darker tree line. The way they walked was steady and slow. Pretty normal, except for the timing. As they drew closer, I could make out more details. It looked like they were wearing a long coat, dragging slightly on the ground. The closer they got, too, the more it began to appear like they weren't walking at all, but floating instead. The figure reached the edge of the gas station lot, and by then I felt goosebumps all over me. You'd expect the lights from the station to begin to illuminate the figure, but they didn't. I swear to God they didn't. The figure remained dark, like a shadowy silhouette. And then it stopped, just stopped walking or floating. Then it turned its head toward the station, towards me. I couldn't see a face even still, but I could feel its attention locking onto me through that glass. I looked down at my phone, maybe instinctually, breaking eye contact, and when I looked back up, the figure was closer. They didn't walk closer, but they were just closer, like it had moved 15 feet in half a second. My hands began to shake. I looked down again just for a second. I don't know why. Maybe I was testing it. When I looked back up, they were only 10 feet away from the window. It was right in the middle of our lights, and yet I couldn't see anything. It was like someone had peeled their shadow off the ground on a hot summer day, letting it walk around and have sentience. It raised one arm slowly and pointed at me. The sleeve of its coat hung down, but there was something off with its proportions. Maybe like the limbs underneath were too thin and bony, just like the fingers I'd seen during the first encounter. I stood there like a statue behind the register, watching all of this unfold, until a truck pulled into the lot. The headlights swept across the parking area, and the figure was simply erased by the beams, there 1 second, then completely gone. The truck, a long-haul semi, pulled up to the diesel pump, and the driver climbed down, completely oblivious. I served him, rang him up, made small talk about the weather. My hands began to shake less and less. When he left, I checked every direction, but the road was empty and so was the parking lot. I knew it was still out there. If I'd seen it twice, I was sure I'd see it again. And because of that thought, I've been watching the road every shift since, waiting for movement. I pray it doesn't come back before I can actually afford to quit this job. Listen to your gut. From Bro Dude Man. I'm a residential HVAC technician. I have been for the past 8 years. And as you can imagine, I've been in and out of thousands of people's homes over the years. I've had my share of creepy encounters with weird people and spooky basements and such. Of all the things I've experienced, there is one event that really gives me the creeps every time I think about it. It was the middle of October. We were in our slow season where we usually keep busy with preventative maintenance calls. Most of my calls were in the city or nearby towns, but this one call in particular was way out in the sticks. I was glad to get a break from running calls in the city, so I enjoyed the long drive out to the customer's house, along with the scenery of the countryside. This was supposed to be a typical maintenance call, nothing special. I pulled into the long gravel driveway and collected my tools and boot covers before walking up to meet the homeowner. Nothing seemed strange at first. The house was old but well kept from the outside. However, when I knocked on the door, I didn't get a response right away. So I waited, then I knocked a few more times. Eventually, I waited too long, and I was about to leave. Just as I was about to turn around, a middle-aged man answered the door, and he stared at me. He wasn't intimidating, but his sudden appearance did startle me a bit. "Can I help you?" he asked. Yeah, I'm here to do your furnace maintenance." He then proceeded to explain that he forgot about the appointment and apologized for startling me. He then let me in the house so I could get my work done. Right away, I noticed the place on the inside was totally disgusting and messy. It's nothing I'm not used to in this trade, but still, he seemed kind of annoyed by me being in there, although it was him that made the appointment. At least, I thought so, because he did live alone. He then led me to where the furnace was. It was in one of the back rooms in a closet. On the way to the furnace closet, we had to walk through a big empty room that looked to be under construction. In this room, there were 3 dog kennels pushed up against the wall in the corner, and in them were 3 very large, vicious-looking dogs, all 3 of which were barking and snarling at me, as if they could burst out of their kennels at any moment and devour me. This put me on edge immediately, as someone who has been bitten by a customer's dog before. Usually I don't see dogs that are that aggressive though. These seemed like they were feral or had rabies or something. The homeowner showed me to the furnace, and I began to do my work silently in the small mechanical closet. After a few minutes, I couldn't help but notice the man never left my side. He was always standing directly behind me, but silently. I'm used to customers being nosy and watching over my shoulder, but this guy was way too close, and he just wasn't saying a word. I tried to break the ice by talking about the weather, but he would just give short, one-word answers, making it even more uncomfortable between the two of us. I got a bad vibe from him, that's for sure. On top of that, the dogs in the next room never stopped barking or growling. It was a tense situation. After doing my routine checks, I found that the furnace needed a lot of attention and a few replacement parts. However, I really didn't feel like talking to the dude, because he just creeped me out so much, despite looking like an overall normal guy. He had something about him that made me feel off. The whole situation seemed off. Everything from the house to the dogs to the guy's odd behavior. I was making up paranoid stories in my head, that this guy was experimenting on these dogs to make them attack, or murdering people and feeding his dogs human flesh, or something like that. All possibly not true scenarios, but at the time, it all seemed plausible, because I knew this guy was up to no good. But how, I wasn't sure. Even so, I had to trust my gut on this one, and just get out of there. I decided I would lie and tell him that nothing was wrong with his furnace and just leave. When I turned around, to my surprise, he had actually left the closet. He wasn't anywhere in sight. It was a relief. I thought he finally decided to mind his own business while I did my work. But that turned out not to be the case. As soon as I walked out of that closet, the man was standing right on the other side of that wall, staring towards the doorway, as if he was ready to pounce. Once again, I jumped out of my skin as this guy startled me half to death, and I backed away. His facial expression never changed. He just stared. I thought the guy was going to attack me right then and right there. I quickly told him that everything looked great, and I was going to head out. He responded with, "Good," and walked me back to the front door, as those vicious dogs barked at me the whole time. He handed me a pre-written check that was already made out, which tells me he clearly didn't forget about the appointment, like he said he had, unless he somehow wrote it well in advance. Either way, without a word, I took the check, and rather rudely booked it out the door and headed towards my van. I threw everything in and hopped in the driver's seat to peel away. As I was about to drive, I saw him standing in front of the window, watching me with that same expression. So I drove away quickly, flinging gravel everywhere. If you were expecting a crazy twist to the story, I'm sorry. There isn't one. Nothing else really happened past that, if I'm being completely honest. Just an extremely uncomfortable and tense situation that gave me chills. One of those things you have to be there to understand. Something in my gut told me there was something wrong with this man. I don't know what it was, but I'm sure I made the right decision getting out of there when I had the chance. I think he was plotting something, and the way he acted, it made me think that he was not the true homeowner. Perhaps the body of the homeowner was in there, and he had fed them to his dogs. Good lord, that Dubowski lady story is going to haunt my nightmares. Seriously, it's not often a story freaks me out anymore, especially the true crime ones, but that one makes me pray I never come home to my front door hanging open. Good night. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Tales from the Break Room. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails, and you can find me on X at Dark Prevails. Send me your scary work stories at eeriecast.com/submit so I can read them on the show. And if you haven't already, please follow and rate Tales from the Break Room on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. Thank you. One more thing, go to lostvoid.app. I worked so hard to make it so you can share your scariest creepypasta and fictional horror stories, or read and vote on your absolute favorite terrifying tales. That's lostvoid.app. Till next time, everyone, I've got to clock out for now, but don't you worry. I'll be back again real soon. Deep in the mountains, your screams will reach far and wide, but they will fade into nothing. This story, titled The Hidden Basement in the Cabin, from a viewer called Nash99, left me feeling unnerved, but also curious. It involves a disturbing discovery, but it's the hints of a conspiracy, possibly even involving the government, that really struck me. What's going on in the Rockies? What did Nash99 and his friend find? This seems to be the kind of information worth killing for. Take this story as an important lesson about the cabin in Colorado you should never enter. Just figuring out whether I wanted to tell the story or not has been a struggle. Part of me wants to forget it happened, but another part wants me to get it out there, maybe as a warning, maybe to finally tell someone who might believe me. This happened in 2021 in the Colorado Rockies, specifically around Idaho Springs. After what happened there, I can barely drive through without breaking into a cold sweat. You can call me Nash. That's not my actual name, but it is a nickname my friends call me. I thought it would be a good in-between for sharing this story online. I was 24 years old when this went down, working part-time at a tire shop in Georgetown, all while taking online courses for a business degree that I still haven't finished, but my real passion, if you could call it that, was urban exploration. Emphasis on the was. You're probably thinking something like, oh, another 20-year-old somebody with a camera, thinking they're going to be the next big urbex YouTuber. But that wasn't it at all. First off, it's not technically urbex out here. It's more like rurex, rural exploration. Though I think some people call it rural-urban exploration, which sounds contradictory. Also, I did have a decent camera setup, a Canon 5D Mark III, which I'd saved up for a couple of years to buy. And rather than going the YouTuber route, I made a little extra cash selling my photos. There's a company that I can't name due to NDAs that buys stock photos of abandoned places for various projects. Movie location scouts, video game designers, those sorts of things. They would pay maybe $100 per photo if they accepted it. Which sounds great until you realize they'd only accepted about 12 of my photos in 2 years. So no, I wasn't in it for the money or the fame. I was in it for something else entirely. Rural exploration was never supposed to be a career, or even a serious hobby for me. It started off as an escape mechanism, a way to deal with some pretty heavy stuff that happened when I was a kid. I come from what used to be a really close, happy family. I've got 2 sisters and 2 brothers. I'm the middle child, which probably explains a lot about my personality, if you believe in that birth order psychology stuff. Growing up in Littleton, we were like something out of a sitcom. We had family game nights every Friday, camping trips every summer up in the Rocky Mountain National Park. I've got great memories of us skiing at Loveland every winter weekend. My parents were high school sweethearts who still held hands at King Soopers after 20 years of marriage. They were the couple all their friends looked up to, the ones who renewed their vows on their 10th anniversary with this big party where my dad serenaded my mom with their wedding song. It was honestly kind of nauseating how in love they were, but it also made our house feel incredibly safe and stable. But then, when I was 16, everything fell apart. I came home from school one day in March to find my mom crying in the kitchen with divorce papers spread out in front of her. For me, there was no warning, no big fights that we kids had witnessed. It was just suddenly boom, divorce. My dad had already moved out that morning while we were at school too. To this day, neither of them will tell us kids exactly what happened, even though I think we deserve to know. All we do know is that they went from being madly in love to refusing to be in the same room together, practically overnight. That does something to a kid. Even if I was 16, almost an adult, I think it messed me up pretty bad. I've actually read about how kids at certain ages often react to divorce at the same psychological level as someone in your family dying. And I think that was true for me. It wasn't just that my parents split up. It was that everything I believed about love and stability and family just evaporated. If my parents, who seemed so perfect together, couldn't make it work, what hope was there for anyone? For me? Anyway, I don't want to get into my whole sob story here, but it does lead up to my experience. So I started to have trouble sleeping. I'd lie in bed replaying old family videos in my head, trying to spot signs of what was coming that we'd all missed. By 2 a.m. on some nights, I'd give up on sleep and I would sneak out of the house. At first, I would just walk around the neighborhood, but that got boring fast, and the local cops didn't take too kind to kids wandering in the night. One night, I discovered this abandoned mining office up on the old Chicago Creek Road, about 4 miles from our house. It was a 2-story building from the 1960s, left over from when they were still trying to revive silver mining in the area. The fence around it had a gap where local kids had bent it back and slipped through. So I did the same. I know it sounds stupid and dangerous. A 16-year-old kid hanging out alone in some abandoned building on a mountain in the middle of the night. There was something about being in that empty, quiet space that felt right. It kind of matched how I felt inside. Hollow, abandoned, forgotten. I would sit on the second floor, where there was this old desk chair that someone had left behind. And I'd smoke some cigarettes that I had stolen from my mom's purse. And I would think. Sometimes I'd cry. And out there I could even scream. And nobody could hear me, except maybe some unfortunate elk. It became my sanctuary, where I could go and fall apart and put myself back together, then go back home. Over time, the exploring became more important than the emotional release. I started to bring a flashlight, then a better flashlight. Eventually, I got a headlamp so I could keep my hands free. I'd explore every room, every closet, every stairwell. I would find old documents from back in the 60s and read them like they really meant something to me. There were geological surveys, coffee mugs, a desk drawer full of elevation maps or something. Each was like an artifact, someone else's story or life that I could distract myself with. By the time I graduated high school, I'd explored probably a dozen different abandoned places in those mountains. I'd had a few close calls, though. This one time, I stumbled into what was clearly a substance cooking operation in some old cabin, and I had to hide behind a woodpile for about an hour until the people who saw me couldn't find me and left. Another time, a sheriff's deputy spotted me coming out of an abandoned ski lodge, so I had to bushwhack through the forest in the dark to avoid him. He probably could have caught me if he'd really wanted to, but I think chasing some kid through the mountains at night wasn't really worth it to him. After I turned 19, I moved out of my mom's house, and I got an apartment in Golden with 3 friends from high school, one of which was Janum. Everyone called him that because he insisted on going by his initials for some reason, J.N., and we just kinda went with Janum. Then there was Martin and Eddie. The apartment was a dump, but it was freedom. I was working at the tire shop by then, making enough to cover my share of rent and start saving for that camera I mentioned. And at least every weekend, I'd spend a night exploring. Let me tell you about Janum, because understanding our friendship is important to understanding why what happened hit us both so hard. We had met freshman year of high school in detention. The thing about Janum is that underneath all his posturing about being a photographer and his terrible taste in music, he was genuinely one of the most loyal people I'd ever met. When my dad forgot my 18th birthday, Janum organized a surprise party. When I got fired from my first job, he got me the hookup at the tire shop where his cousin worked. He was the kind of friend who would drive 40 minutes at 2 a.m. to pick you up from a bad date, no questions asked. Soon I got him to come with me on my explorations, pretty regularly too, once we moved in together. At first, I think he just didn't want me going alone. But eventually, he got genuinely into it. He'd like to spend time researching the history of places, and he'd get real excited whenever he learned about the families who used to live in abandoned homesteads or things like that. He always approached our explorations like an archaeologist, creating elaborate narratives about the people who used to inhabit the spaces. Martin came once to an old lodge we visited. We had convinced him it would be like a video game in real life, which in retrospect was a stupid comparison. About half an hour in, we heard what turned out to be a mountain lion screaming in the distance. If you've never heard one, it sounds exactly like a woman being murdered. And I swear Martin nearly pissed himself. He never came with us again, and we never let him forget about it. Eddie thought we were both idiots who were going to get murdered by mountain folk or fall through a rotten floor, which, looking back, he wasn't entirely wrong. By 2021, Janum and I had a pretty good system going. We'd scout locations during the day, look for places that seemed truly abandoned. No fresh tracks in the snow or signs of squatters, especially no drug stuff. We had a whole kit too, headlamps with red filters to preserve night vision, and backup flashlights. We'd come prepared with first aid kits, dust masks, gloves, portable phone chargers, and even bear spray just in case. I mean, this is Colorado we're talking about. We would bring a crowbar too, but we tried not to break anything if we could avoid it. We were not doing this to be jerks, trashing places up or stealing things. We were there to document and appreciate these forgotten places. That brings me to the story. Janum found this place on an old Forest Service map earlier that week. A large cabin complex up a forestry road between Idaho Springs and Mount Evans. From what we could tell, it had been some kind of private hunting lodge from the 70s that was abandoned after a fire damaged part of it. The really exciting part was that it was massive for a mountain cabin. The main structure alone looked to be about 8,000 square feet, based on old real estate records, with several outbuildings. Places that big usually had interesting stuff left behind, because it was too expensive and difficult to haul everything down the mountain. "This is it," Janum had said, practically bouncing in his desk chair as he showed me the aerial photos. "This is the one that's going to get us those sweet stock photo dollars." "You said that about the last 5 places," I'd reminded him. But I was excited too. The scale of it was impressive, and the fire damage meant it probably hadn't been completely picked clean by other explorers or scrappers. We spent the next few days preparing. Janum was obsessing about it practically. I recall this checklist he showed me on his phone. Things to do, what to bring. He was checking weather reports every few hours, calculating sunset times and moon phases for whatever reason. He wanted to go on Friday, but I had to work late, so we pushed it to a Saturday instead. I remember him being weirdly anxious about that delay, like he had a premonition or something. But that's probably just my mind playing tricks on me in hindsight. Maybe we could have avoided the horror if we had gone on Friday. Who knows? We loaded everything into Janum's 4Runner, a beat-up 2003 model that his parents had given him when he graduated high school. That thing had 200,000 miles on it, and made some rather concerning noises whenever you turned to the left. And yet, it was perfect for getting to hard-to-reach places. The drive up there started like any other Rurex night. We stopped at the 7-Eleven in Idaho Springs for Red Bulls and beef jerky. The guy who worked there, Sal, always joked about us being ghost hunters. Then again, he may not have been joking and honestly thought we were ghost hunters. "You boys find any ghosts yet?" he asked. "Not yet," Janum said, "but tonight feels lucky." Looking back, that feels like foreshadowing, but at the time we just laughed. The drive up the highway was beautiful in that eerie way mountain roads are at night. The temperature had dropped below 25 degrees, and there was frost forming on the windshield. We had to use the defroster on full blast, which meant the heat was cooking us even with the windows cracked. Janum was playing this terrible SoundCloud rapper he'd discovered, and we spent most of the drive arguing about whether the guy was genuinely bad or so bad that he was accidentally genius. About halfway up, we passed an old Forest Service gate that was supposed to be locked but was hanging open, luckily. The chain had been cut years ago and was never replaced. We parked about a quarter mile from the cabin, behind a stand of lodgepole pines. Always hide your vehicle if you can. That's Rurex and Urbex 101. We then hiked the rest of the way. The moon was almost full that night, so natural visibility was pretty good. "There it is," Janum whispered, even though there was no reason to whisper. The building materialized out of the darkness like something from a scary movie. A big old log structure with a stone foundation and huge windows, most of which were broken. Half the roof had caved in from snow load, but the other half looked surprisingly intact. Even in its destroyed state, you could tell this place had been magnificent once. "Holy crap," Janum said as we got closer. "Look at the size of this place. Someone had serious money." "Had" being the operative word there, I said, running my flashlight over the carved wooden door that hung off its hinges. "This place looks like it could have taken years to make." "And now it's rotting in the mountains," Janum said. "See, that's what I mean about stories." He pointed out the carvings on the door. Carvings of elk, bears, mountains, all done by hand. Somebody cared enough to commission this door, and an artist was paid to spend months carving it. And now it's just forgotten. He looked a little sad. We slipped through without even having to move the door. Inside, our flashlights revealed what had once been a stunning great room with 30-foot ceilings and a massive stone fireplace. Antler chandeliers hung at crazy angles from the exposed beams, covered in cobwebs. The place smelled like rot and mold and animal crap. But underneath all that, I could still faintly smell old wood polish. There was still furniture there, like some leather couches, which had been torn apart, probably by animals. There was a pool table with peeling felt, and an old piano so warped that when Janum pressed a key, it made a sound like a dying animal. We began to explore systematically. The kitchen had commercial-grade equipment, now rusted beyond recognition. In what must have been an office, we found hunting permits from 1978 and business correspondence about guided elk hunts. The really interesting part was the wing that hadn't been damaged by the roof collapse. It was like stepping back in time. Wood paneling, orange shag carpet, wood grain electronics from the 70s. There was even a reel-to-reel tape player and a bar stocked with empty bottles of liquor I'd never heard of. We'd been there for about an hour, and I was getting some great shots of decay and abandonment. Then Janum called out from somewhere deeper in the house.
"Dude, you need to see this."
I found him in what looked like a utility room at the back of the intact wing. Unlike the rest of the cabin, this room was sparse and utilitarian, and in the floor was this trap door with a padlock on it that had been cut. "Maybe it's a wine cellar," I suggested. "In a utility room?" Janum was already pulling the trapdoor open. "This is hidden for a reason." The trapdoor revealed a ladder going down into complete darkness. Our flashlight showed it went down maybe 15 feet into what looked like a natural cave that had been expanded and reinforced with concrete. "These mountains are full of old mine shafts," I said, though something about this felt different. "Do you think maybe they built over one?" "Only one way to find out," Janum said, already starting down the ladder. And so, we went down. I followed Janum. The temperature dropped noticeably as we descended. At the bottom, we found ourselves in a tunnel carved from rock and reinforced with concrete archways every 10 feet or so. The ceiling was low enough that we had to duck slightly, and the walls were damp with mountain runoff. "This isn't a mine," Janum said. He ran his hand along the two smooth walls. "Someone put serious work into this." The tunnel went straight for about 50 feet, then opened up into a larger chamber. And that's when things got weird. The first thing we noticed was that this room actually had power. There were LED work lights on stands, all connected to a generator that was still warm to the touch. The room itself was maybe 30 by 40 feet, carved from the rock but with a smooth concrete floor, and it wasn't empty. "Janum," I whispered. My throat felt suddenly dry. "This isn't a good idea. I think we need to leave, now." But he was already moving forward, drawn by the horror of what we were seeing. There were chains bolted into the walls at various heights, a stained mattress in one corner that looked disturbingly recent. There were blue industrial tarps spread out on the floor, with these dark stains and what looked like scratches, where someone had tried to grip the floor. "What the heck is this place?" Janum's voice was barely a whisper. His usual joking demeanor was completely gone. He seemed scared. We then smelled a certain smell. Not that smell of abandonment I described before. This smelled organic and rusty at the same time. "We're leaving, Janum," I said. I grabbed his arm. "Right now!" "Wait, do you hear that?" he said, pulling away from me. I stopped and listened. There was a sound from the back of the chamber, a soft whimper almost like an injured animal. We both froze. Our flashlights swung toward the sound at the same time, toward the part of the room that was darkest, where those LEDs didn't reach. "Oh crap," Janum breathed. "Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap." She was huddled in the furthest corner, partially hidden behind one of the concrete pillars. She was young, maybe early 20s, wearing something like a dirty hospital gown that might have been white once, but was now gray and brown with filth. Her feet were bare and bloody from the rough floor. Her hair was matted and tangled, hanging in clumps. And when our lights landed on her face, her eyes were wide open, but unfocused, staring through us at something only she could see. "Oh Christ," Janum gasped. We began to walk towards her. His hands were shaking so bad, his flashlight beam was dancing all over the walls. "Miss, hey miss, we're going to help you. We're going to get you out of here, okay?" She didn't reply to him, didn't even blink. She kept staring with those empty eyes, like she wasn't really home anymore. I'd seen that look once before, on a documentary about catatonic patients, like her mind had gone somewhere else to escape whatever had happened to her in this room. "Nash, we have to get her out of here," Janum said. His voice was all wobbly. "We can't just leave her here." I know, I replied. I pulled out my phone. There was no signal, of course. We were too deep in the mountains, and now we were underground. "Can you carry her? We need to..." The ladder rattled behind us. The sound was like ice water down my spine. Metal on metal, slow, terrifying. Someone was coming down. "Hide," I hissed. But there was nowhere to go. The room was mostly open, just the support pillars and some equipment along the walls. A figure dropped the last few feet, landing in a crouch like some kind of animal. He stood up real slow, and I'll never forget what he looked like. Tall, around 6'2", wearing a thick Carhartt jacket with the hood up despite us being underground. His face was concealed in shadow, but I could see his breath coming out in puffs. In his hand was something I'd never seen before. Some sort of machete, but with a deeply serrated edge that looked designed to cause maximum damage. Its metal was dark and stained with something I didn't want to think about. "Well," he said, his voice surprisingly calm, "this is unfortunate." Janum stepped forward a bit. "We were just exploring. We didn't know anyone was here. We'll leave." "No, you won't," the man said simply. Then the girl made a sound, like a dying animal, and I heard her shift behind me. The man's head snapped towards her, roaring, "Shut up!" That one moment was all we needed. Janum grabbed one of the LED lights and hurled it at the man's head. It connected with a crack, and the man stumbled backward. We sprinted for the ladder. I hit it first and flew up, with Janum right behind me. Below us, the man's footsteps were getting louder, closer. We burst through the trapdoor and ran through the cabin, jumping over broken furniture, slipping on debris. Behind us, I could hear him going up the ladder. We made it outside and ran full speed toward where we parked. I nearly ran into a few trees in the darkness, stumbling over roots and rocks. That freezing cold and thin mountain air made every breath burn. But we didn't stop. I knew what could happen if we did. When we reached the Forerunner, Janum's hands were shaking so bad he dropped the keys twice before managing to start it. As we tore down that rutted forestry road, I looked back and I saw a figure standing at the tree line, watching us leave. Just standing there, not pursuing, like he knew something we didn't. "The girl," I gasped, still trying to catch my breath. "We have to go back for her." "Are you insane?" Janum was driving way too fast for the road conditions. The Forerunner was sliding around corners, the headlights swinging wildly across the trees.
"We're not going back there. We're calling the cops. Let them handle it."
With how tightly he was grabbing the steering wheel, he was starting to worry me. The vehicle was weaving slightly. I had never seen him so scared. Hell, I'd never been this scared. My entire body felt like it was vibrating. Maybe that's what adrenaline feels like. I'd never felt it before.
"Pull over, you're gonna crash,"
I said.
"I'm not stopping till we're off this freaking mountain."
When we got back to where we had cell service, about 5 miles down the highway, he did pull over at a scenic overlook. We sat there for a minute with the engine running, heater blasting, both of us trying to think of what we needed to do, of what we even saw.
"What the heck was that?"
Janum finally said.
"What the actual heck did we just see?"
"I don't know, and I don't want to know," I said. I had my phone in my hands, trembling still.
"But that girl, Jesus, Janum, she looked like she had been there for I don't even know how long."
"Her eyes," he said, and I knew exactly what he meant. Those empty, unfocused eyes would haunt me for the rest of my days. I finally called 911, trying to keep my voice as steady as I could, to explain to the dispatcher what we'd found. The dispatcher took our report seriously enough. Abandoned cabin, possible kidnapping victim, an armed and possibly dangerous suspect. She said they would send deputies immediately and asked if we could wait at the bottom of the forestry road to guide them up. They want us to wait," I told Janum after hanging up.
"Screw all that," he said immediately. "What if that guy comes down? What if he follows us?"
"He's not going to leave the girl there as evidence, I'm sure."
"You don't know that."
Janum got irritated.
"We don't know what he's capable of. Did you see that freaking blade? That wasn't a camping knife, Nash. That was made for..."
He couldn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he meant. That blade was for hurting people, killing people, for cutting into things that didn't want to be cut. We ended up waiting anyway, parked at the bottom of that forestry road with the doors locked and the engine running, ready to bolt if we saw anyone coming down. Janum could not stop fidgeting, constantly checking the mirrors, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel compulsively.
"She was wearing a hospital gown,"
he said suddenly.
"Why was she wearing a hospital gown?"
"I don't know, man."
"Did he take her from a hospital? Or did he put her in it? Why did he..."
Janum, I don't know. I don't know, man. But the chains, those chains on the wall,
there were multiple sets at different heights. That means... Oh God, that means she wasn't the first.
That thought made me physically ill. I prayed Janum wasn't right. But if he was, how many other people had been in that underground chamber? And why? It took 2 hours for a sheriff's SUV to finally show up. 2 deputies, both looking annoyed at being called out to the mountains in the middle of the night, followed us up the mountain. Janum drove even more erratically than before, constantly checking the rearview mirror to make sure they were still following us, and that no one else was. When we got back to that cabin, everything had changed. The trapdoor was now closed and had a new padlock on it, a heavy-duty one that looked fresh from a hardware store. The first deputy, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, tried his best to break it, while his partner covered him with her hand on her service weapon.
It's not budging,"
the first officer said, after a few minutes of trying with bolt cutters. Then I heard something from their radio. Another emergency. A multi-car accident on the interstate, requiring all available units.
"Look, we'll come back with proper equipment," he told us,
taking our contact information. "First thing in the morning. We'll have a whole team up here, don't you worry about it." But they never did come back. When I called the sheriff's office the next day, they said they'd investigated and found nothing but an old root cellar. No evidence of a girl or recent activity. The deputy I spoke to, different from the ones we'd met, suggested we'd maybe stumbled upon some urban legend hunters trying to scare people, or at the very least had altitude-induced hallucinations from the thin air. "Altitude what?" I'd practically screamed into the phone. "We live in Colorado. We're used to the altitude."
Son, I'm just telling you what the report says. The deputies found nothing suspicious.
Janum took the news even worse than I did. He became convinced that the men from that cabin had connections in the sheriff's department and stayed up until 4 a.m. reading conspiracy forums and missing persons reports. "Man, 3 women have gone missing from hiking trails in this area in the last decade," he told me one night, a laptop in his hand, "all in their 20s with dark hair." I wasn't sure if that related to what we'd found, but I didn't entirely disregard it. He had installed a new deadbolt on his bedroom door and would constantly check the apartment locks. "He got my license plate, man," he kept saying. "He knows what car I drive." "Look, Janum, some random mountain psycho can't just look up your address from your plate number." I tried to reassure him. "How do you know he's random? That chamber wasn't built by some homeless drifter. That took planning, resources." He actually had a point, and it terrified the hell out of me that I hadn't thought of it until then. What in the world did we stumble on? It took a couple weeks before I felt comfortable enough to get back out there, to go back out on my Rurex expeditions. As I told you before, it was my way to cope with things, and I needed to cope badly. On a Thursday night, I headed back out. I didn't go to that cabin, obviously. I was never going to go back there. But I went somewhere else, somewhere easy and safe. There was an abandoned gas station at this junction, an old Conoco from the 1960s that had been closed for at least a decade. A single-story, small place right off the road where people would see if anything went wrong. This kind of place might actually have some interesting vintage signage that the company would want photos of. I went alone. Janum refused to go anywhere near an abandoned building. It was around 9 p.m. when I pulled up to that abandoned Conoco station. The place was perfect for what I needed. The old pumps were rustic, and there was plenty of vintage signage, and with it being right off the road, I felt safe, at least somewhat. I was inside taking photos when I saw headlights come up. A van parked right next to my car, blocking it in. The driver got out, someone with a hood over their head and a very familiar build. It was him. I watched, still as a statue, as he broke into my locked car somehow and leaned inside for about 30 seconds, then stepped back. He walked to the middle of the parking area, looked directly at where I was hiding, pointed at my car and gave a thumbs up. Then he drove away. Only after waiting 10 more minutes did I decide to creep out to my car. I circled around to the driver's side door, freaked out that he had put a bomb or trap in there. Eventually, the desire to get the heck out of there as soon as possible overwhelmed me, so I opened the door. On the driver's seat was a crumpled up piece of paper. I picked it up and spread it open. It said, "I know both of you saw." I drove home probably doing 90 on the highway. That note was sitting on my passenger seat like it was a live grenade. My heart was going even faster, 100 miles per minute. I could barely hold on to the steering wheel. Reminded me of Janum driving down that mountain hysterically. What did that note mean? Of course we saw. We saw the woman, we saw him. But was it a threat? A warning?
What did he want from us? When I got back to the apartment, Janum was in the living room playing Call of Duty with the volume too loud. He tended to do that when he was stressed out. I considered not showing him the note, but I figured he probably deserved to know. So I showed it to him, and I watched his face morph from anxiety to terror. "Oh, bro, we need to move," he said. "Pack our crap and just go. Tonight." "And go where?" I asked. "We don't really have the money for a hotel. Our names are on this lease." 3 knocks came from the front door. It was so loud and sudden that Janum actually threw his controller across the room. We both froze and stared at the door. It was 10:30 p.m. Nobody would be visiting this late. I crept over to the peephole. There was a man outside, but no hood. This guy was wearing regular clothes. Joggers, a CU Boulder hoodie that was pulled down revealing a shaved head, and he was holding something in his hand. I watched, and he brought it to his mouth, exhaling a cloud of vapor. Just a vape, a normal-looking guy. I looked back at Janum. He was holding on to a piece of 2x4 that he kept in his room, his version of self-defense. I would have gone for the crowbar, but that's just me. "It's not him," I whispered. "Looks like a different guy." "Well, don't open it," Janum whispered back. But something about the casual way the guy was standing, vaping and looking around like he was waiting for a pizza delivery, made me curious. I opened our door, but I kept the chain on. Hello?" I said through the gap. The man looked at me, took another drag from his vape, and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile, but more like he had just won a bet with himself. "You Nash?" he asked. I didn't answer, but something in my face must have confirmed it. He laughed and shook his head. Do you need help with something?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "Nah," he said, turning to walk away. But then he stopped, looked back over his shoulder, and said, "But now I've seen. Just wanted to let you know." He gave me a thumbs up, that same exaggerated thumbs up the hooded man had given me, and he walked into the night. I slammed the door and locked everything. Deadbolt, chain. I even dragged a chair over to prop under the handle. Janum was on the phone already, with the police, but I could tell from his side of the conversation that we weren't going to be taken seriously. Some guy came to your door and said something weird? Oh, scary, but not a crime. No threats made. Nothing they can do. Have a nice night. The next morning, I went straight to the county sheriff's office. I insisted on filing a report in person, describing the man and explaining the connection to the cabin and the woman we'd found. The deputy taking my report looked skeptical the entire time. When I finished, he said, "Sounds like mountain people protecting a meth lab. They don't like outsiders finding their operations. And that woman was probably high out of her mind. They're warning you to stay away from their territory." "You've heard of meth cookers with underground bunkers?" I argued. "Who can easily break into locked cars? Who know our names and addresses?" He shrugged. "Look, son, unless someone actually commits a crime, there's not much we can do. My advice, stop breaking into abandoned buildings. It's dangerous, and it's illegal, and clearly you're stirring up the wrong people." I wanted to scream at him. But what was the point? They weren't going to help unless someone actually got hurt, which would probably be me or Janum. And would they help? Maybe not even then. The next 3 weeks were tense but uneventful. Janum and I both took time off work and stayed with our parents for a while. Him with his mom in Fort Collins, me with my dad in Colorado Springs. We kept in touch by text.
both of us admitting how jumpy we were, basically waiting for something to happen. Martin and Eddie stayed at the apartment and reported nothing out of the ordinary. Maybe it was over, I started to think. Maybe we had been warned off, and as long as we stayed away from their territory or whatever, they'd leave us alone. I started to feel stupid for running away, for letting some probably drug-addled mountain hermits scare me out of my own apartment. So after nearly a month, I came back. Sadly, Janum stayed at his mom's. He said he was done with rural-urban exploration, done with the apartment, done with all of it. He was going to move back home permanently and finish his degree online. I couldn't blame him, but I also couldn't afford the apartment without his share of the rent, and I couldn't stay with my dad forever. My first night back was a Sunday. Martin and Eddie were both out. Martin was at his girlfriend's place, and Eddie worked a night shift at the Amazon warehouse. I was alone, trying to catch up on homework, when exhaustion hit me like a wall around 11 p.m. The stress and altitude changes had been messing with my sleep, and when it finally caught up with me, I crashed hard. I went to bed without even brushing my teeth. Yuck, I know. Barely managing to kick off my shoes before falling into bed. I was asleep in seconds. I woke up to the feeling that something was wrong. You know that feeling when your sleeping brain registers a change in the environment and makes you wake up? When I came to, my room was dark, but there was light coming from somewhere. It took my groggy brain a moment to process. My bedroom door was open. I never slept with it open, and through it, I could see that the front door to our apartment was also open, letting in the harsh light from the hallway. I sat up, more confused than scared at first. I assumed Martin had come home drunk and forgot to close the doors. But then, I saw him in the corner of my room where my desk created a pocket of deep shadow. Someone was standing there, perfectly still. "Real easy to get in here," the figure said, and I recognized that voice immediately. The hooded man. "Your locks are cheap. I've been thinking about killing you." He said it so matter-of-factly, like he was telling me about his weekend. I couldn't move or speak. I just couldn't believe what was happening. He took a step forward, and I could see more of him in the dim light. Same thick jacket, same obscured face, and in his right hand, that serrated blade catching what little light there was. "People don't know how to mind their own damn business," he continued, walking slowly toward the bed. "You saw something you weren't supposed to see. You called people you should not have called. You made things complicated for me." He was at the foot of my bed now, and I still couldn't bring myself to move. It was like sleep paralysis, but I knew I was awake. This was real, and it was happening. "The thing is, I could kill you right now. Cut you up into pieces small enough to scatter around the mountains. Nobody would know what happened to you. You'd just be another missing person who was last seen breaking into abandoned places." He began to reach for my bedroom door with his free hand. He closed the door slowly, and that's what broke me from my stupor. The thought of being trapped in this room with him, with no escape route, it sent a lightning strike of pure adrenaline through my system. As he looked at the door, searching for a lock that he didn't know didn't exist. We never had locks on our bedroom doors in this place. I rolled off the opposite side of the bed and scrambled for the window. I'd never opened that window before. Honestly, didn't even know if it would open. But I yanked on it with every bit of strength I had. It stuck.
then suddenly gave way, sliding up with a shriek of protesting metal. I heard him curse behind me, heard rapid footsteps coming around the bed, and I dove through that window. I landed hard on the concrete, awkwardly, on the walkway outside, rolling to absorb the impact but feeling like something in my shoulder popped. Then I was running, barefoot in only my boxers and t-shirt, sprinting down the alley behind our building in 40-degree weather. But quickly, I heard him behind me, those heavy footsteps. I ran as hard as my life would allow. I burst out onto the road, where there were still cars passing by, streetlights, witnesses. I spun around, and I saw the man stopping at the mouth of the alley, that weapon now hidden behind his back. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Him in the shadows of that alley, me in the middle of the street, like a crazy person in my underwear. Then, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the dark. A passing car honked at me, and I realized I was standing in traffic. I made it to the sidewalk and called 911 from a borrowed phone. This time, they took it seriously. Breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder. These were crimes they would actually respond to. It only took me almost getting cut into pieces. The police found our apartment door still open, some of the rooms ransacked, and the window I'd escaped through still gaping. They took fingerprints, but I knew they wouldn't find anything useful. This guy was too careful for that. They said they would increase patrols in our area, but what good would that do? I moved out the very next morning. I didn't pack most of my stuff. I grabbed what was important, my camera equipment, some clothes, some documents. Martin and Eddie moved out the same week too, after being told what happened. Our landlord was ticked off about breaking the lease. But I didn't care. I'd rather have bad credit than be dead. I moved in with my dad in Colorado Springs, and I haven't been back to the northern mountains since. I found out later from Martin that the county sheriff's office did eventually go back to that cabin again, but they found the whole thing had burned down, fully this time. Whether from arson or wildfire, they couldn't tell. There was no evidence of the underground chamber we'd found, no evidence of the girl, nothing. But personally, I don't think they looked hard enough. I still have nightmares about her eyes, that empty stare, the sound we'd heard from behind us that caused that man to be distracted. I wonder, was she even actually alive when we found her? I can't even remember her breathing. Was the sound we heard some sort of death rattle? If she was alive, was she still there when the place went up in flames? Mostly, though, I have nightmares about him, standing in the corner of my room, telling me how easy it would be to make me disappear. It took me almost 2 years before I went back to exploring again. And even now, I only go to places that are well known, well documented, where other people regularly visit. I never go alone, and I always tell multiple people exactly where I'm going. I take a knife with me now, just in case, though my anti-gun dad actually insists that I get a gun anyway. I also moved into an apartment with real security, like an actual deadbolt that can't be pried apart or broken, at least not easily. I think the worst thing about all of this, though, is not knowing. Who was she? What was that room for? What did we find? Was it human trafficking or some kind of snuff film? Or a serial killer and his playground? Whoever he was, he knew how to find our names and our addresses. And I can't help but think that means he had connections. Speaking of which, I've since done some Googling about that location and the cabin itself. At one point, I found some interesting information. Apparently, that land
had been leased by a government agency of some sort. It started back in about 2003, but what I couldn't find was any record of that lease being terminated or transferred, meaning the land that cabin sits on was leased out to some government people. How does that connect? Does it at all? Or am I just connecting ghost dots? I'm sorry if I don't have any answers or if this conclusion is unsatisfying. I've never told this story publicly before, and I'm only sharing it now anonymously because I feel like people should know. The Colorado mountains are beautiful, but they're also vast and isolated, perfect for hiding terrible secrets. If you're listening, and you're someone who enjoys urbex or rurex or whatever, be careful about every building you go into. I think the best advice I can give you is if you stumble upon a place that doesn't look quite as abandoned as you thought it would be, turn around and leave right then and right there. It's not worth it. It might seem like a good idea to explore forgotten places. It might feel nostalgic and wholesome to experience these settings lost to time. But if you're not careful, you'll get caught up in something that will drag your life into the pits of the underworld. Thank you for listening. This has been a special episode of Tales from the Break Room, a show you can also find on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. I've been testing this new single-story format. It allows me to dive deeper into certain stories, making their presentation more immersive and thrilling. And so far, reception has been great. But please, let me know in the comments if you think it's something I should continue to do. I hope you all have an incredible but safe Halloween filled with fun and candy. Until next time, everyone, I'm Darkness Prevails. It might be time for me to clock out, but I'll be back again real soon. Subscribe now for hundreds of true scary stories and real monster sightings. Wait till the end of the video for the discussion question as well. Beware the golden arches. This world is a strange one. McDonald's is the most successful fast food restaurant in the world. It may not be the healthiest place, but it sure is convenient and delicious. But even the most falsely happiest of places can be riddled with dangers and horrors. Ghosts lurk around every corner. Perverts and creepy strangers watch us from afar, and creatures of the unknown wait to make us their prey. So, to make sure you have nightmares of every possible location, here are 5 true scary stories of McDonald's submitted by viewers. If the burgers don't kill you, something will. Number 1. Drive-Through Ghost. Submitted by Maynard. 2015. I worked for my local McDonald's for about 4 months. Yeah, it didn't last long. I like to believe that there's something better for me out there than fast food. Plus, this experience didn't exactly make me want to stay. It's definitely the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. Trying to kiss ass and move up quickly, I let the managers know that I would cover any shift they needed me to, and I could fill in for any call-ins. I needed the money. The more hours, the better. Well, one night at around 8 p.m., just before my bedtime, I got a call from work. Someone from the night shift had called in. Very irritated and tired, I hesitantly agreed to cover the shift and got up to get ready. I had never worked overnight before, not at that McDonald's and not at any of my previous jobs. I was kind of excited. I mean, it was night. There would be at least half as many customers coming through, and the manager on duty was John, the most laid-back guy that worked there. Easy money.
When I arrived around 8:30, they were slammed. I clocked in and chiseled away at the mountain of customers in the lobby. By 10:30, the sudden wave had died down, and the building was mostly empty. The previous shift leader left me with nothing but a good luck, even though this was my first night shift. So it was just me and John. He was busy checking drawers or something, while I manned the drive-thru, the front counter, and the grill. Needless to say, I was nervous. If too many people pulled in, I was fucked. My drive-thru time would be horrid, so instead of remaining relaxed like I thought I would, I ended up so focused that my heart was pounding the whole night. Anyway, at our restaurant, I'm not sure if it's the same for every Mickey D's, our headsets will chime whenever someone pulls into the drive-thru. It's a kind of pixelated bell sound that gets very annoying, very fast. This is exactly what I heard all of a sudden. So, naturally, I greeted the customer. "Hi, welcome to McDonald's. How can I help you today?" I said with so much fake enthusiasm it even made me sick. I never quite understood if it was a magnet or a scale that told us if a car drove through, but the microphone was on, ready to pick up the customer's voice as they ordered. Yet, all I heard was white noise. Nobody picked up, nobody spoke. I didn't even hear the rumble of an engine idling. It was as if no one was there. Now, this wasn't too weird. We've had this happen a few times since I started. The thing can be triggered just by someone driving around the building or a person walking by. The thing needed fixed, that's for sure. I didn't want to know every time someone took out the trash in the back as they rolled the bins over the drive-thru. After about 3 minutes of static, the mic clicked off, meaning whatever was on the wait was gone. Finally, no more annoying noise in my ear, but less than a minute later, it clicked on again, that bell chiming loudly in my ear. I rolled my eyes and repeated my greeting. "Hi, welcome to McDonald's, how can I help you?" And again, there was no reply. The mic stayed on longer this time, though. I swear at one point I could hear heavy breathing. I started to get freaked out. At that moment, I was pretty sure someone was outside trying to mess with me. It turned off after about 10 minutes of me listening to nothing. I was tempted to take off the headset and make John wear it, but my be-all-I-can-be attitude got the better of me. I tried to distract myself. I started scrubbing the counters, which had already been wiped down, and checking to see if anything in the lobby needed restocked. But everything was fine. I needed to keep myself busy. There was just something so sinister about the darkness of the night just beyond those large lobby windows. When the bell chimed once again, I nearly fainted. I should have probably turned the volume down on that headset. Before I could say my shallow, meaningless greeting, I heard the loudest, blood-curdling scream. The moment I heard this screech, I threw off my headset and backed away from it. What the hell was that? Shakily, I put my headset back on. I was pissed and terrified at the same time. Without another thought, I ran angrily out of the store and headed toward the drive-thru. I stood right next to the menu, and there was no one there. But still, somehow, the static from my headset never disappeared. The mic was still going. Whatever made the drive-thru go off was still there. And then I heard it. "I see you." A slowly whispering voice coming from the mic. I ran back inside as fast as I possibly could. I had been standing right next to the mic. No one was there. No one could have possibly made that sound. There was no one that could have spoken those words to me. I ran back into the light and warmth of the building and into the safety behind the counter. I found John. He was at the manager's desk, head in his hand, while typing in dates on the upcoming schedule. "What the hell was that?" I said louder than I meant to be. He jumped in his chair and turned around. "Christ, man, you scared the hell out of me." "What are you trying to pull?" I asked. "What are you talking about? I haven't done anything." He turned to continue typing on his computer. I kind of felt bad. I just interrogated my superior, the only fun superior that worked there. Shit. I walked up front and stood behind the counter, just waiting. It was about 1:30 when I looked at the clock again. We were about halfway through the graveyard shift. The night was going by so slow. I ended up just standing in the drive-thru nook. That way I could just play on my phone away from the view of the nearest camera. We had had only 2 customers in the last hour, so it was even more slow than I thought it would be. So I just stood there, leaning against the counter by the POS computer, playing Clash of Clans and checking Facebook every so often. But suddenly, I felt cold air on my forearm. It gave me chills. I looked over toward the drive-thru window, and it was ever so slightly open. I didn't mind. I paid it no attention and continued to invade random online folks. Slam! I dropped my phone, breaking the screen when it hit the ground. I nearly had a heart attack. My eyes darted all over, searching for the origin of that noise. The drive-thru window had been thrown wide open, but I had been standing right next to it. I hadn't heard anybody run off or walk up, and I definitely hadn't seen anybody. So who the fuck just opened the drive-thru window? I was done. I took my headset off and stood in the kitchen pretending to work, waiting for this terrible shift to end. Whether or not someone drove through the drive-thru, I didn't care anymore. I wasn't coming back after that night. The rest of the night, or morning, I guess, passed by without any further incidents. Never in my life have I encountered anything so strange and terrifying. Standing out there, right next to the microphone that cold night, then hearing those words whispered to me. I will never forget it, and I will do anything in my power to avoid having to work fast food. And I am no longer a fan of horror movies. I know I'm in denial, but I pray every day that what I heard that night was nothing but a prankster, not a ghost or a demon that felt like taunting me. But if that's really what it was, I'm scared that there's nothing stopping it from happening again. Number 2. Pervert at the Habit Trail. Submitted by Close Call. Remember when McDonald's had those jungle gyms with the ball pits? Yeah, for the longest time, those were the hotspot for children to jump around and just have a shit ton of fun. Hell, I even remember as a child playing with my temporary friends in those balls. Every time we'd go to McDonald's, I'd gleefully find other kids I hadn't met before, and we'd jump into that rainbow-colored pit. Now, though, with a child of my own, I've heard plenty of horror stories that will make me keep my kids away from the habit trails altogether. Well, actually, it's not so much the horror stories I've heard that scare me. It's an experience that happened not too long ago. I try not to let my kids eat fast food. It's disgusting, it's unhealthy, and it's addictive. Eating fast food in and of itself is a terrible habit, but there is one thing it does have that tempted me to treat my daughter and son to a couple of Happy Meals one day. Convenience. Around noon, I was enjoying my day off with the kids. My wife was at work, and I hadn't bought groceries like I was supposed to. Not to mention, I was exhausted from work. This was my first day off in a very long while. So, when my son Chris started begging for McNuggets, I thought, what the hell, and stopped on by our local artery clogging experts. That McDonald's was extremely packed. There had to have been 4 dozen people in there either lined up waiting to order or sitting down awkwardly staring at each other. Expectedly, the moment the kids saw the play area through the windows in the back, they took off. They hadn't even told me exactly what they wanted to eat. Figured, though, they probably only wanted to stop by McDonald's to play on the habit trail. After several minutes, I was finally up to order. I got them both a couple of nugget Happy Meals and headed to the play area and sat down at a bench. The kids frolicked and played all over the damn thing with 10 other children, most of which looked like they hadn't been bathed in a week. As you can probably tell, I'm not very fond of the McDonald's scene. But again, I was desperate that day. the big hunk of plastic tubes and ladders could babysit my kids for an hour, I was fine with that. The kids played for about 10 minutes before they finally came down to eat their food. We were enjoying our meal when I noticed something rather strange. There was a chubbier child in the ball pit. He was redheaded with curly hair. What was strange was the expression on his little face. He looked like he was about to cry at any moment. He was frowning and tearing up, his eyes locked on one point in the room. I looked to see what he was staring at. It was just a glass window with lightly busy midday traffic just beyond it. So I just kept eating my food, trying not to pay any mind to the motionless kid. But for every bite I took, I was more and more worried, curious. I mean, my kids were here too. If this kid was crying, I'd like to know why. Eventually, he pulled himself up out of the ball pit and began to walk back over to a woman that must have been his mother. But on the walk over, I noticed the kid's pants were down, and he started pulling them back up. My first thought was, Jesus Christ, this kid just shit in the ball pit. And at that point, I was ready to leave. My appetite was gone, the appetite I barely had in the first place. I let my kids finish eating, though, not saying a word about what I saw. Once they were done, I told them we had to go, and despite their whining efforts to make me stay, I made them get back in the car. Well, later that week, I was reading the newspaper. I made the mistake of drinking hot coffee when I read a certain article. I literally spat it out on myself when I read it. At that very same McDonald's that we had gone to, a man had been arrested for, get this, sexually assaulting children while hiding in the ball pit. Holy shit. Luckily, my kids had never gone in there themselves that day, but they had been so close to it. And in the headline photo, there was a woman being interviewed. She was crying. It was that chubby boy's mother. I remembered her face and that red hair. This moment terrified me, shocked me more than I had ever felt before. I feared for my children and for the society as a whole. We let our kids run around, play, and trust that the world built around us is safe and protected. But that day, right under my nose, was someone that, within seconds, could have ruined my children's lives, forced a lifetime of therapy on them, and took away their normalcy from then on. I am so grateful that my kids were spared that. I can only pray that that poor little boy grew up all right, and that that perverted fucker got what he deserved. Also, if you're wondering about the case itself, this happened around '89, and I've tried a few times these days to find it online. But I guess it's just not on the web. Doubt the story if you want, but as a father, I'm not spreading this to tell some disgusting lie. I'm telling you this story as a warning and a cautionary tale. No matter how you've raised your kids, stay close to them and keep your eyes open. Number 3. Bathroom Creeper. Submitted by M. Perkins. Public bathrooms have always scared me. In school, no matter how bad I had to go, I would not use the bathrooms. I just couldn't even force myself to use them. I mean, I've seen kids make fun of other kids just for going to the bathroom. Kids are horrible. I wanted to avoid that at all costs. People simply scared me. They would embarrass you, humiliate you, hurt your feelings, all over something so natural and stupid. So for most of my life, I avoided public restrooms. But one day, this was in 2002, we were driving through Dallas at the end of a road trip on our way home. It was me and 2 other friends, Jessica and Ruby. It was maybe 11 at night, and we were on the highway. They were starving. I was tired, but had to pee bad, and we were still an hour from home. I had already been holding it for about 2 hours. I'm surprised I even made it that far. Anyway, we were passing one of the many dozens of random McDonald's in Dallas, and Jessica suggested we pulled over and take a break. Of Of course, I was extremely hesitant about using the bathroom there. I would almost rather pee in a bottle in the car than go into a public restroom. For the first time in my life, my body won out on this one. I got out of the car and ran before I peed all over myself. It only took me a second to locate the bathrooms, and to my dismay, there were no family restrooms. I was already there and seconds away from bursting. I threw myself through the swinging door. First, the smell hit me. Now let me tell you, just because it was a woman's restroom doesn't mean it wasn't disgusting. This thing smelled rancid, sort of like spoiled milk or a rotten diaper. It was bad. There were 3 stalls. I quickly checked for feet below the doors and saw that they were each empty. The coast was clear. I opened the first one and nearly threw up. There was piss all over the seat, used toilet paper scattered on top and next to the toilet, and it looked as if the thing had been used daily but hadn't been flushed for weeks. I shut it and very reluctantly checked the second stall. That one was clear and clean, but somehow, for some reason, smelled 3 times as bad as the other one. Just in case, I checked the third stall. It was disgusting as well, so I stepped back and into the second and locked it. Well, it didn't really lock. The little bolt caught in the hole, but anyone that wanted inside that stall would just have to push. That creeped me out, but I figured I'd be in and out in a few seconds, so I covered the seat in toilet paper and sat down slowly. It was a relief to finally get all of that out of my system. 15 seconds of relief later, I was about to stand up when I heard the swinging door open. I froze. Someone had entered the room with me. Immediately, I stayed quiet as possible, trying to pretend I wasn't there. Yeah, I'm a freak. I just really hated being in a vulnerable spot like that. I waited for the person to do their business. But I never heard the faucet come on. In fact, I never heard anyone open a stall. That's odd, I thought. I had heard the footsteps after the door opened, but now there was no sound. If anyone was there, I'd definitely hear them breathing at least. I waited a few more minutes. Still, no other sound came. So I assumed I was safe. Maybe somebody had walked in and backed out. Maybe someone changed their minds about coming in. I didn't know, but to be sure, I lowered my head ever so slowly to check for the feet of someone else in the room with me. There was a man's face staring up at me. He smiled a toothless grin. He was lying down on the bathroom floor looking up at me. He was dirty with messy gray hair and a darker gray beard. I jumped off the seat, pulling my pants up, while trying to cover up all my exposed skin with my arms. I screamed. I knew everyone in that building would have heard me. A second later, I heard laughing and the sound of footsteps running out of the bathroom. Then, maybe 10 seconds after that, I could hear Jessica and Ruby. "Are you okay? Sherry, what happened?" Jessica called, knocking on my stall door. I could barely even talk. I didn't know I was crying, but there were tears running down my face. I remembered I needed to pull my pants up, so I did. I stepped out to see their surprised and worried faces. "Oh my God, you don't look good. Did something happen? Are you hurt?" Jessica wanted answers. I shook my head. Some fucking pervert was staring up at me from under the stall. "Jesus, are you okay? Where'd he go?" Ruby sounded angry. "I don't know, he just ran out," I replied, starting to calm down. We all walked back to the car, eyes peeled for that creepy man. The girls begged me to make a police report, but I couldn't help but feel, I don't know, weird I guess. I just wanted to get home, take a shower, get in my own bed. Besides, I only saw the man for maybe 5 seconds before he was up and gone. I climbed in the back seat of the car and sat back. Before we stopped, I was tired and ready to go to sleep. But now I felt wide awake and homesick, a little bit shaky. As we took off, I ended up glancing back at the place, the big neon arch hurting my eyes. Then I saw him. I swear to God, it was the same man. He was standing exactly where we had been parked, smiling and waving goodbye at me. I got chills. Travel in packs, girls. Keep each other safe. I can only be thankful that that creepy man wasn't more desperate. Number 4. McDonald's Mugging. Submitted by Candescent Skies. This is one of those things that I, and probably everyone else, easily assumed would never happen to me. Needless to say, I didn't expect it, and it has left me very twitchy and nervous since then. This happened in 2007 when I lived in Kansas. There was a local McDonald's in my town that I stopped at every morning, or at least tried to. One of those half gas station, half fast food joints. This one just happened to be at a very convenient corner on my way to work, so I'd often go in, grab a McMuffin, and a can of Starbucks espresso to get my day going. This was a Tuesday, and I remember it all plain as day, unfortunately. For some reason or another, the McDonald's side of the store was crowded that morning. There were at least 30 elderly folks there, chatting up the place like a bunch of teenagers. I almost walked out. The line was a bit long, and I only had 20 minutes to get to work. The drive itself was 10 minutes long, so I didn't have too long to be waiting. But I had never been late, and I was starved that morning, so I figured what the hell. I stepped in line and waited, eyeballing the menu to see if there was anything new, or if there was something else I wanted, even though there was no way in hell I'd be changing up my routine. As I stood waiting, I felt something poke against my lower back. Before I could turn around, I heard someone whisper a bit too close in my ear. "Don't do anything." My heart froze. I felt paralyzed. The voice continued while I tried not to panic. "I'm just going to grab your wallet. Everything will be fine if you just don't move and don't say a word." I was silent, but honestly, I had never been more terrified. Maybe it was a kid with a butter knife trying to take advantage of me, or maybe it was an ex-convict desperate for money with a gun in his hand. I had no way to be sure, and I wasn't about to die on a Tuesday morning at a fucking McDonald's. "The fuck is it?" I heard him nearly shout behind me. He just barely managed to whisper. The man sounded pissed. That's when I realized I must have left my wallet in the car. Often, I would put my wallet in the passenger seat or in the cup holder, as it would make my back hurt or my bottom uncomfortable. "So where the fuck is it?" he asked very hurriedly. It's in my car," I said nervously. "Well, looks like we're going for a little ride then." He seemed relieved. Fuck, I thought. He was happy we'd be going in my car. Away from people, away from prying eyes. He could make me go anywhere he wanted me to. God, I was so scared. My heart was racing. I wanted to take off running and scream that someone was mugging me. I was surrounded by so many people, but I felt more afraid than I've ever been in my life. And for the first time in my life, I was actually afraid I was going to die. I started thinking. Quickly, I had to figure something out. I had to get myself out of this fucking mess. If I turned around or made any sudden movements, surely he'd use the weapon that he had shoved into my spine. If I spoke too loud, I'd be dead before anyone could do anything. So, I was stuck, life endangered in the breakfast line at a McDonald's. How the hell had my life turned out that way? Anyway, there was one thing I could do that didn't require me risking the existence of an actual weapon behind me. The guy didn't sound old, but he didn't sound young either. I thought I could talk my way out of this. I swallowed hard and gathered my courage. "I don't think you want that wallet," I whispered back to him, my head turned toward my side as far as I could get away with. "Shut up. Start walking." He seemed to be ignoring me. I don't think $10 is worth 15 years in prison. Maximum security prison, too. He must have heard me that time, because he seemed to stand still. He didn't urge me to keep walking. I tried to look even further behind me to see his face, but I couldn't. I did manage to see a woman with 3 unwieldy preteen boys come in. I continued. Robbery with a firearm is a first-degree felony, and I honestly don't think you'd be fast enough to shoot or stab me before I ran through those doors. What the fuck was I thinking? My heart felt like I was going to explode. Every word I whispered nearly came out stuttered, but somehow I found the power to make them sound confident. I was no lawyer, but I remembered a bit of the basic stuff from a legal studies course in high school. The kind of shit they nail into your head and can't forget. Thank God for that this time. Shut the fuck up. I'm sure you've got more money than that. I see the coat you're wearing. I saw the car you got out of. Well, if there's not more than 10. He sort of snickered. Let's just hope there's more than 10. Fuck. It hadn't worked, and now I was sure he was threatening to kill me if I didn't have the money. And the fucked up part? I really only had $10 in my wallet. I had recently paid a few bills and was ready to glide through the rest of the week with food from home. I've actually done it a few times before. Come on, keep moving. He shoved the weapon in my back hard. It was cold and painful. I didn't want to move, but I felt I had no choice. Jimmy, I heard a female voice behind us shout. Then there was a hard smack as if something fell to the floor. A lot of movement behind me made me turn. The man was no longer looking. I turned around and saw it. One of the boys that had come in was wrestling around with his brother when he was shoved into my mugger. The mugger himself, who was far more thin and frail than he had sounded, and wearing a thick black hoodie, was on his ass in the floor staring at something that lay on the ground. I looked toward it. A jet black pistol. It wouldn't have been noticeable blending in with that damn hoodie he wore. In an instant, I made a break for it, and so did he. Sadly, he was closer, and he grabbed the gun. I expected the worst to happen. But it didn't. He grabbed the gun, shoved it in his pocket, and ran full speed out of the place. When I was sure he was out of the building, I looked around and saw that everyone had seen it too. They had seen the man drop the gun. Immediately, I got out my phone and called the police. I made a statement, told them everything. They talked to several other folks as well. In the end, though, nobody got a good enough look at his face, and last I heard, he was never caught. I like to hope that he ended up trying and failing again and was arrested for a different crime, because it is honestly a bit hard to sleep at night knowing that there are terrible people out there, and then there are even worse people, too, who are still at large. Number 5. Midnight McDonald's Creature. Submitted by Marco Poco. This short but terrifying experience took place around late September of 2014. Me and some friends were making a night of it at my place, and at around 1 in the morning, we all had the munchies. We decided to hop in my van and drive over to the McDonald's that was about 2 miles down the road. It had been raining that night just before we left, so the empty streets had that creepy, wet glimmer from the street lamps. It was already an eerie scene. The van's air conditioner hadn't worked for months either, so I usually drove with the windows down. We pulled up to the drive-thru. I noticed that there was no one in the parking lot, and not a single car in the drive-thru. That was fine by me. It just meant we'd get our food more quickly. It is important to note, though, that at this particular McDonald's, there were numerous trees on the right, and the restaurant itself to the left as you pulled through. It was almost a forest, but it was too thin to really be that, and just on the other side of it, the island of trees led to a pharmacy. We pulled up in front of the menu and waited to be greeted. And waited. And waited. Eventually, I said hello, trying to get someone's attention. But no one answered. The guys were telling me to just pull forward and see if they'd meet me at the window. One of them said that despite the 24-hour sign, that they might be closed for some repairs or something. I doubted that. If anything, this whole situation was kind of suspicious. Just when I decided to go ahead and pull forward to the window, one of my friends said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, stop." I put my foot back on the brake and turned toward him. "Did you hear that? There's something growling over there." I thought he was joking, until I turned toward where he was looking. I saw glowing yellow eyes next to a tree about 5 yards away from the van. I could just barely make out a low, steady growl. I assumed it was just a dog, so I rolled up the windows on that side so it didn't try to climb in or jump at us. I continued to pull forward when suddenly the thing that had been behind the tree ran out of the darkness and beside the van. I only got a brief look at it, but I was entirely sure that this was no dog. It was more the size of a grown mule, but thin and bony. Its skin was green and brown with random hair scattered all over it. I kept my foot on the brake and rolled up the rest of the windows right away. I didn't want to keep moving, just in case my mind was playing tricks on me, and this was some kid playing a joke. We all waited, spooked out of our minds. I kept looking out of the windows to try to find it. The thing must have been just below us where we weren't able to see. Then someone in the back screamed. I looked toward them and saw at the back window, just above the edge of the metal, were a set of eyes and horns. Small but pointed horns. The thing was just staring in at us. And at that moment, we all screamed and jumped away from the creature. Then, with a loud screeching noise, the creature took off back into the small patch of trees. I didn't hesitate. I drove back home. It wasn't worth a Big Mac staying next to those damned woods with that weird thing out there. I have no idea what we all saw that night, and we haven't seen anything like it since. Its eyes looked reptilian with that sort of black slit in the middle. I honestly have never seen an animal in real life or on TV that looked anything like it. And I hope I never see it again. The next time you're out on the town and just can't wait to get home to have your next meal, think twice about stopping anywhere, even McDonald's. You are never as safe as you want to be. All it takes is one person, one spirit, one creature to decide that you will be their next victim, and you will never see it coming. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thanks. Time for the discussion question. What was your most terrifying or worst experience at McDonald's? Food poisoning? An attack? For me, it would be the time I went with my fiancée one morning, trying to enjoy my bacon egg cheese biscuit, when a toddler pulled down her pants and shit in the floor. That was an entirely different kind of biscuit that I was not in the mood for.
As a horror narrator, sometimes a story gets sent to me that's a bit too short or a bit too long, so it's hard to fit into an upcoming script. And because of that, sometimes it sits in my inbox for weeks, months, even years, and I end up forgetting about it. This is one such story, and when I read it, I was horrified. Partially because I'd let it sit for so long, but mostly because it was marked as a true story. People change names, even locations, when they share their true stories. Others often outright fake their stories. What I'm about to share with you has no title, and the author was completely anonymous. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether you believe this or not, but it may be the most terrifying skinwalker story on the internet. There were 2 times in my life where I was certain I was dealing with a skinwalker. Not the internet kind, not the Hollywood version. I'm talking about the real thing, the Yi Nod Lushi. The kind my grandfather warned us about when my parents weren't around. The kind that makes Navajo elders go quiet and change the subject. The first time, I was 10 years old, and it wore my dog's skin. The second time, I was in my mid-20s, and it wore the skin of a man I helped rescue from the high desert outside Cortez, Colorado. I'm going to tell you both stories, because I believe they might be connected in ways I'm only now beginning to understand. They both still keep me up at night. My name is Mason. I'm Navajo on my mother's side, and I grew up splitting time between Tulsa and Window Rock, Arizona. For 15 years, I worked as a wilderness EMT and volunteer search and rescue coordinator for San Juan County. I've seen people die in the back country, and I've found bodies that had been out there for weeks. I've dealt with hypothermia, rattlesnake bites, falls from cliff faces, and one particularly bad encounter with a mountain lion. But nothing prepared me for what I found during that search in 2006. Let me start at the beginning, with the first time. I was 10 years old the summer my grandfather told me the story. This would have been 1991 in late July, hot enough that you couldn't walk barefoot on the dirt roads around Window Rock. Kent and I were staying with our grandparents for 2 weeks while our parents took what Dad called a much-needed vacation. Kent was 8 years old then, all knobby knees and questions. He'd follow me around like a shadow, trying to do everything I did. Most of the time, it annoyed me, but at our grandparents' house, I didn't mind as much. The place felt too big at night, with more dark corners and creaky boards than I cared for. Grandfather didn't tell stories the way white people do. He'd mention things in passing, dropping pieces of information, and you'd have to pay attention or you would miss it. Most of the time, he'd be doing something else, like fixing a fence or working on his truck, cleaning his rifle, and a story might just come out. That day, he was skinning a rabbit he'd shot that morning. I was sitting on an overturned bucket watching him work. Kent was inside with grandmother, helping her make fry bread, or more likely, getting in her way while she fed him pieces of dough. "You know why we don't whistle at night?" Grandfather asked me. I shook my head. It was something I'd been told not to do, but no one really explained why. "Whistling calls things that listen." He made a precise cut, peeling back the hide. His hands never shook, even though he was well into his 70s. "Most of the time, nothing answers, but sometimes something does." He didn't look at me. He kept working. "My grandfather told me about a man from Chinle. This was a long time ago, before the long walk, maybe before that. This man, he wanted power, wanted to live forever and to do things normal people can't do. So he learned the dark way, killed his own brother to do it, wore his skin until it became his. After that, he could wear anything's skin. Coyote, Owl, deer, even other people. I remember my mouth going dry. Did they catch him? No, things like that, you don't catch them. You avoid them. You don't say their name, and you don't whistle at night. You keep your windows closed and your doors locked, and you never invite something inside. He finally looked at me. And if you see something that doesn't move right, that doesn't sound right, even if it looks like someone you know, you run. You understand me? Yes, sir. I mean it, Mason. You see your brother, your mother, your father, and something feels wrong. You run. Because it's not them anymore. He went back to the rabbit. We didn't talk about it again that day, but that night I lay awake in the small bedroom I shared with Kent, listening to every creak and groan of my grandparents' house. The window was open. It was too hot to close it, and I stared at the gap in the curtains, scared I'd see something looking back. Kent was asleep in the other bed, breathing steady. He could sleep through anything, that kid. I envied him that. And then, something scratched at the window screen. I went rigid. The scratching came again, like nails dragging across metal mesh, testing it. Then it stopped. I heard breathing on the other side of the screen, heavy and wet, like a dog had been running, but not a dog. I wanted to get up to close the window, but I didn't dare move. The breathing continued for what felt like hours, but maybe it was only a couple of minutes. Then there were footsteps, padding away through the dirt. I pulled the covers over my head and prayed. Eventually, I fell asleep. The following night, it came back. Around the same time, I'd been watching the clock. 2:47 a.m. The scratching was louder this time and more persistent. There was a smell with it now, seeping through the screen. Reminded me of roadkill long forgotten in the summer sun. Kent stirred in his bed. Mason, what's that smell? Go back to sleep, I whispered. Is there someone outside? Just go back to sleep. That was when the scratching stopped, but then there was a voice. Let me in. It sounded like grandmother, but not quite. Kent sat up then. Was that? I flew out of bed and slammed the window shut, locking it. Whatever was outside made a sound. Not quite a laugh, but not quite a growl either. Then it moved away. In the morning, there were claw marks on the screen. Deep ones, like something had tried to tear through. The frame was bent where something had pushed against it. Grandfather saw this when he came to wake us up. He didn't say a word about it. He just got his tools and replaced the screen. That night and every night after, the windows stayed closed. He burned sage in our room, leaving a line of ash on the windowsill. A couple of nights later, we heard it walking on the roof. Heavy footsteps, too heavy for any animal that should be up there. It stopped right above our room. Kent was crying quietly in his bed, trying not to make any noise. I wanted to comfort him, but I couldn't move. I was too scared to speak. We lay there listening to it pace back and forth until sunrise. In the morning, Grandfather found tracks in the dirt around the house. He would not tell us what kind. He spent the day making protection bundles, hanging them above every door and window. Whatever it was, it didn't come back. Not to that house anyway. 3 weeks later, our dog went missing. His name was Checkers, a mutt we'd had since I was 6. He had these black and white patches and floppy ears, the kind of dog that never met a person he didn't love. Kent had picked him out from a litter at the pound. Checkers slept in my room, followed me everywhere, and would steal food right off your plate if you weren't watching. He disappeared on a Tuesday night. We had let him out to pee around 9 o'clock. Dad opened the back door and Checkers trotted out, tail wagging like it always did. We were watching TV, some sitcom my mom liked. About 10 minutes passed, then 15, and Dad went to call him back in. "Checkers, come on, boy!" Nothing. Dad grabbed a flashlight and went out to look. I could hear him calling from different parts of the yard, his voice getting more concerned every few minutes. After about 20 more minutes, he came back in. "I can't find him. He must have gotten out somehow. Think he found a gap in the fence somewhere." But I'd been playing in the backyard that afternoon. I never found a gap. We spent the next 3 hours searching the neighborhood. Mom drove slowly through the streets while Kent and I called out the windows. Dad walked with his flashlight, checking under cars and bushes. Our neighbors came out to help. Someone from 2 houses down said he'd seen Checkers around 9:15 sniffing around in garbage cans. But that was it. I didn't sleep that night. I kept going over to the window, hoping to see him sitting on the porch. Kent cried himself to sleep. I heard Mom and Dad talking quietly downstairs until nearly 2 in the morning. The next day, we made flyers. Mom drove Kent and me to Kinko's, printing out 50 copies with Checkers' picture. The one from last Christmas where he was wearing the stupid Santa hat Kent had put on him. It read, "Missing dog, family pet, reward," and we put our phone number on the bottom. We spent the afternoon putting them up, on every telephone pole, every stop sign, even the grocery store bulletin board in the vet's office. Kent would knock on doors while I stood behind him, watching him explain to each neighbor about our missing dog. His voice would crack when he described Checkers. He was trying so hard to be brave. "He's really friendly," Kent would say. "He won't bite or anything. If you see him, could you call us, please?" An old lady said she would keep an eye out. The teenagers at the corner house barely looked up from their video games. And one kind woman gave us cookies, promising to check the shed. Days passed. Every time the phone rang, I'd run for it, hoping. But it was never about Checkers. Mom kept saying he'd come back on his own. The dogs have a fantastic sense of direction. But by the 4th day, even she stopped saying that. Kent barely ate. He'd sit by the back door after school, watching and waiting. I caught him leaving bits of his sandwich on the back porch. Checkers' favorite, peanut butter and jelly. "He'll smell it," Kent said when he saw me watching. "He'll know we're waiting for him." A week went by. The flyers started to fade in the sun by then. Mom gently suggested maybe we should think about visiting the pound, see if there were any puppies that needed homes. Kent ran to his room and slammed the door. I heard him sobbing through the walls. Then there was the false hope. Someone called on day 10, saying she'd seen a black and white dog in the park. We ran there. Kent was still in his pajamas. But it was someone else's dog, a female with different markings. Kent's face when he realized. I'll never forget that. It was like something broke inside him. 12 days after Checkers disappeared, he came back. I was the one who found him. Early in the morning, with barely any light out, I'd gotten up to use the bathroom and happened to glance out the living room window. And there was Checkers, sitting on our front porch, staring at the door. I should have been happy. I should have run to let him inside. But I didn't, because something was wrong. He was sitting extremely still, like a statue. Dogs, especially ones like Checkers, don't sit that still. Checkers couldn't hold still if you paid him to. And he wasn't panting when it was already hot out. No, his mouth was closed. Dogs pant, it's what they do, but Checkers was just sitting there, watching the door. And he was so clean. A dog missing for 12 days should be dirty, matted up, maybe even skinnier. But his coat looked perfect, groomed even. He was cleaner than when he'd left. I stood at the window for a long time, at least 5 minutes, maybe more. He didn't move, didn't scratch at the door, and didn't whine. He sat there staring, occasionally tilting his head, as if curious. Then Mom came down the stairs. "Mason, what are you doing up?" "Checkers is back," I said. She rushed to the window, made a happy sound, and headed for the door. I grabbed her arm. "Wait." "What, honey? He's been gone almost 2 weeks." The dog stood up then. The way he moved was very peculiar. It's hard to explain better than that. Like the actors and puppeteers on Sesame Street trying to handle a puppet. His back legs locked, then his front legs, and he sort of levered himself upright instead of standing the way dogs stand. Mom hesitated. His head swiveled toward her. Not turned, but more like a swivel, and his eyes were weird too. Dogs' eyes catch the light. But Checker's eyes that morning were flat black. Mom opened the door. "Mom, don't." But she was already reaching for him. Her hand touched his head, and that's when he moved, faster than I'd ever seen Checkers move. He snapped at her, teeth clicking together an inch from her fingers. She jerked back with a yelp. "Jesus Christ!" Dad's voice came from behind us. He was on the stairs in his boxers and a t-shirt. "Back up from the door, now!" he commanded. Mom stumbled back. The thing that looked like Checkers took a step forward, crossing the threshold into our house. Its mouth opened, wide, and I heard a sound that should have never come from a dog. It sounded like my name. Dad grabbed the bat he kept by the front door. "Get out!" he shouted at it. The Checkers thing's head tilted the other way. Its mouth closed, and for a second, it almost looked like our dog again. Then it turned and walked off the porch. It was in no hurry. It just walked slowly. I watched it stop at the edge of our yard, and it tried to stand up. And I mean stand up, like a person, on its hind legs. It got about halfway, front paws hanging down, wobbling like it was trying to remember how to balance itself. It held that position for about 3 seconds, this horrific half-standing thing, before dropping back down to all fours. Then it ran, normal dog running, clearing the neighbor's fence in one bound and disappearing between the houses. We stood there in the doorway, the three of us, not saying anything. Kent showed up a minute later, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Dad said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "Go back to bed." "Was that Checkers?" He'd seen it. Of course he'd seen it. "No," I said. "That wasn't Checkers." Kent looked at me, then Dad and Mom, and his face crumpled. "But it looked like him." "It wasn't him," Dad said firmly. "Checkers is gone, buddy. That was something else." "What do you mean, something else?" None of us knew how to answer that. Dad called Grandfather that morning. They talked for an hour in the kitchen while Mom kept Kent and me in the living room. Kent hadn't said a word since seeing the thing that looked like Checkers. He sat on the couch instead and stared at nothing. I could hear Dad's voice getting louder and more agitated. Mom put on cartoons, but I wasn't watching it, and neither was Kent. Finally, Dad came out. "Pack a bag. We're going to stay at a hotel tonight." "Why?" Kent asked. "Just for tonight, until Grandfather gets here." We stayed at the Holiday Inn by the highway. Dad got us a room with 2 beds and a pull-out couch. We ordered pizza, but nobody ate much. Dad kept checking the locks on the door,
and Mom held Kent while he cried about checkers. I sat by the window watching the parking lot. "What was that?" I finally asked. Dad and Mom looked at each other. Then Dad said, "We don't know." But I think he did know. They just knew better than to say it out loud. Grandfather arrived the next morning. He brought some stuff with him. Herbs I didn't recognize, some small bundles wrapped in cloth, a jar of something that looked like ash mixed with dirt. We went back to the house. Dad went in first, checking every room while we waited in the car. When he gave the all clear, Grandfather got to work. He did not explain what he was doing, but he went through the house room by room, marking door frames and windowsills, burning dried plants that filled the house with thick smoke. Mom opened all the windows to air it out, but the smell lingered for days. I wondered if it was the same sage he burned at the window that night. When he was done, he sat all of us down in the living room. Kent and I were on the couch, and Mom and Dad were in the chairs. He stood in front of us. "Whatever came to your door yesterday, it's gone now. It won't come back. But you need to understand something." He looked at each of us in turn. "That was not your dog. Your dog died out there somewhere, and something else is wearing its skin. Maybe it's been wearing that skin for days. Maybe it was waiting for the right time to come back. But it's not Checkers. Checkers is gone." Even Mom cried then. I felt my eyes burning, but I didn't let the tears out. Kent was staring at the floor. "There are things out there," Grandfather continued. "Old things. Things that learned dark medicine a long time ago and wear animal skins and become those animals. Some of them wear human skin too. They're drawn to weakness, grief, fear. That's when they're most dangerous." "Why did it come here?" Dad asked. "I don't know. Maybe it was just hungry. Maybe it was curious. Maybe something drew it." He paused. "But it said Mason's name. That means it was watching you and learning. If I had not come, if you had let it stay this way, it would have tried again. And eventually, you would have let it in." "How do you know?" I asked. "Because that is what they do. They wait and they watch and they learn how to be what you want them to be. And then, when you're not paying attention, that's when they take you." That night, Mom and Dad sat in the kitchen, talking amongst themselves, an all too familiar sound these days. I couldn't hear everything, but I did catch pieces. "Can't be real." "Saw it. We all saw it." "Rational explanation." "Stood up. It tried to stand up like a man." "The boys are scared." "Should be scared. I'm scared." They talked until almost midnight. In the end, they decided not to talk about it anymore, to pretend it never happened, to tell people Checkers had been hit by a car if anyone asked about the flyers. We burned Checkers' collar that night in the backyard. Grandfather said that part was important, that we needed to let go completely. Kent cried. I didn't. I'd already said goodbye to the real Checkers days ago. Whatever that thing was on our porch, it wasn't my dog. For months afterward, I had nightmares. I would dream that Checkers came back again and that we let him inside, that I woke up to find him standing at the foot of my bed, eyes flat and black. In those dreams, he would open his mouth wide and say my name. Mason. Kent had nightmares too. I could tell because I heard him whimpering in his sleep and calling out. He started to sleep with the lights on, and he would start checking under his bed before getting in. Even though we were just kids, he never wanted or asked for another dog. Neither did I. The nightmares eventually did stop, or maybe they just became less frequent.
I learned to live with what I'd seen, packed it away in that part of your brain where you keep things you don't want to think about. Years passed. I grew up and went to college, got my EMT certification, and started to work search and rescue. Kent got married and had kids before me, and life went on. I almost forgot about Checkers, almost convinced myself it had been some kind of rabid animal, that my 10-year-old brain had exaggerated the details. But then, about a decade and a half later, I got a call about a missing hiker in the Four Corners area, and everything I'd tried to forget came screaming back. Because when we found him, when I saw his face and looked into his eyes, I knew what he was. And I knew I'd made a terrible mistake bringing him home. The call came in at 4:47 a.m. on a Saturday in October 2006. I was already awake. I hadn't been sleeping well since my divorce. Yep, 26 years old then, and I was already divorced. My phone lit up with Tom's number. He was a San Juan County SAR coordinator, former park ranger, and the kind of guy who'd been doing this for 25 years and had seen everything. If he was calling before sunrise, somebody was in real trouble.
Hey Mason, we've got a missing hiker. Navajo male, 32 years old. Name's Joseph Binnelly. Went out solo hiking Thursday afternoon near the Sleeping Ute Mountain Trail System. Was supposed to check in with his wife yesterday. She called it in last night when he didn't come home.
I was already pulling on my pants. Weather?
A cold front moved through yesterday evening. Temps dropped to the low 30s last night. He's got gear according to his wife, but we're looking at 48 hours exposure minimum.
I'll be at the staging area in 30.
Make it 20. We're losing daylight.
Well, he was gonna have to settle. I made it in 25. The staging area was a dirt lot off the highway, where it curved past the New Mexico border. 5 trucks were already there. People from the sheriff's office, Mark Webb with his tracking dog, Tom's old Ford, a couple of volunteers I knew by face but not by name. Tom was spreading a topographical map across the hood of his truck when I walked up. The man looked tired. Then again, Tom always looked tired. 25 years of pulling bodies out of the wilderness will do that to you. Mason, good. You know the Sleeping Ute trails? Well enough. What's our search grid? He pointed to a section of the map marked in red. Wife says he was planning a day hike, probably this loop here. 8 miles, moderate difficulty. Should have been back by dark Thursday. His truck's still at the trailhead, keys locked inside. We checked. No sign of forced entry, no sign of a struggle, just gone. Has he done this trail before? Wife says he hikes up here once a month, knows the area. He's experienced. Tom paused and rubbed his jaw. But here's the thing. 2 ranchers reported livestock killings in this area over the past week. 3 calves mutilated. They'd been opened up, organs taken out. Navajo Nation police sent someone out but couldn't make sense of it. That sent some chills down my spine. Predators? That's what they're calling it officially, but the ranchers are spooked. One of them said he found tracks near the kill site and claimed they were human footprints. They went all the way up to a barbed wire fence, then disappeared. Said there was nothing but coyote prints on the other side. One of the volunteers, a woman named Sarah, came up and adjusted her radio. We ready to head out? Every minute counts in this cold. We divided into 3 teams. I was paired with Sarah and Mark Webb. Mark and his dog would take point. Sarah and I would cover the flanks. Tom took a volunteer firefighter named Bill and headed north. The others went to cover the eastern grid. The trail began as a well-maintained path with clear markers. The morning air was crisp. There was frost still clinging to the shadowed areas. But as we climbed higher, the terrain got rougher, with loose scree, steep drop-offs, and sections where the trail narrowed to barely 2 feet wide, with nothing but air on one side. About a mile in, we found the first strange thing. It was a dead raven, perfectly intact, lying right in the middle of the trail. There were no wounds or signs of what killed it. Mark's dog, Bear, wouldn't go near it either. In fact, he stood there whining until Mark picked it up with a stick and tossed it into the brush. "That's weird," Sarah said. "Ravens don't often drop dead like that." Half a mile later, we found 3 more, all arranged in a rough line across the trail. "Poison, maybe?" Mark suggested. I wasn't sure about that. Bear had Joseph Binley's scent from a jacket his wife provided. The dog was good at his job, nose down, moving steadily up the trail. But 2 miles in, he stopped. Just stopped dead, head up, ears forward. "Bear?" Mark moved up beside him. "What is it, boy?" The dog whined. Not his normal working sound. This was high-pitched, anxious. He took 2 steps backward, away from something up the trail. "Strange," Mark said. "He's been acting weird all day. Doesn't usually spook easy. I mean it. He tracked through a mountain lion's territory last month without batting an eye." Sarah had her hand on the radio then. "Maybe he's picking up on a predator." But Bear wasn't acting like he'd scented a predator. Poor dog looked terrified. "Let me check ahead," I said, and moved up past them. The trail curved around a boulder the size of a car. I rounded it, then stopped. There was a smell, not strong but distinct, a coppery and herby smell. Something else too, reminded me of dead deer. And as I had rounded that boulder, the temperature seemed to drop. Maybe like 10 degrees colder in this one spot. But there was no shade here, no reason for that to happen. My hand moved to the knife on my belt without me even thinking. "Mason?" Sarah called. "See anything?" "Nothing," I said. Just hold on." The dirt ahead looked disturbed. Not footprints exactly, but like something had been dragged across it recently. The disturbance went off the trail and into the trees, then came back, then continued up the path. Whatever made it had been moving in circles, like it was confused, or like it was playing. "We should mark this location." Sarah came around the boulder. "Mark what? I don't see anything." I looked again. She was right. Staring back at the dirt, it was normal now, just a regular trail. The disturbance I swear that I saw was gone, but that smell and the cold spot were still there. We continued up. Bear eventually started to work again, but he stayed close to Mark, kept his tail low, looking back over his shoulder every few steps. 3 miles in, we found the first piece of evidence. A water bottle, partially buried under fallen leaves. The label matched the brand Joseph's wife said he carried.
"Okay,
Tom's voice crackled over the radio.
we've got scent. Tighten the search grid. He's in this area somewhere."
But the water bottle bothered me. It seemed to have been placed carefully. Not dropped or discarded, but placed there, with the cap on, sitting upright under those leaves, like someone had arranged it, as if someone wanted us to find it. The next 2 miles were harder going. The trail deteriorated into barely more than a game path. We had to use our hands to scramble over rocky sections. Sarah slipped once and caught herself on a pine branch. When she pulled her hand back, there was blood on her palm. Not from thorns, but from tiny-looking cuts, like the branch had been sharp as glass. What the hell? She took a closer look at the branch. It looked fine, but when she touched it again more carefully, it cut her finger, just like that. Ow, that's not normal. All the vegetation in this area was like that. It looked normal, but it was wrong when you looked closer or touched it. When Mark tried to push through some bushes, he jerked back. His jacket had been torn in 3 places. More carefully now, we pushed deeper into the high country. I started to notice other things. The further out we got, the fewer birds sang, fewer insects made sounds, and before long, it had all died down, leaving this claustrophobic stillness, that made every sound we made seem too loud. At 10:23 a.m., Mark's radio crackled.
Team 2 has contact. We found him, North Ridge near the Box Canyon. He's alive.
Relief flooded through me. Alive. We'd found him alive.
Condition?
Tom asked. There was a pause. Then,
He's, walking. Looks disoriented but mobile. We're bringing him down now.
we altered course to meet up with Team 2. It took 40 minutes of hard hiking through rough terrain. I was becoming more anxious by the second. This forest did not want us here. And for what reason, I did not know. When Sarah grabbed my arm suddenly, I nearly shouted. She said, "Mason, look at that." She pointed to a tree ahead of us. There were handprints on the bark about 7 feet up. Human-shaped handprints, pressed deep into the wood like the tree had been soft when they were made. But that was an old tree. Had to be 50 years old at least. Make that make sense. When we finally reached them, I saw Joseph Bentley for the first time. He was sitting on a rock, wrapped in an emergency blanket, drinking from a canteen. He was in his mid-30s, average height, black hair pulled back in a ponytail. He looked tired, but otherwise unhurt. No visible injuries, no signs of exposure. His clothes were clean. That struck me as odd. 2 days in the wilderness, and his pants looked fresh. No dirt, no tears, nothing. Dave from Team 2 was talking to him. "Just stay calm, we're gonna get you checked out and get you back to your wife." "I'm fine," Joseph said. His voice was somewhat emotionless. Just got turned around. Lost track of time. "You've been out here 2 nights, buddy," Dave said. "Temperature dropped below freezing, too. We've got to get you checked for hypothermia, dehydration, and..." I said I'm fine. The way he said it made something cold settle into my stomach. There was no relief in being found in his voice. No embarrassment either at needing to be rescued. Nothing that you would expect from someone who had been lost. I moved closer to him. "Joseph, I'm Mason, Wilderness EMT. I need to do a quick check if that's okay, to make sure you're good to walk down." He looked right at me. His eyes were brown, normal size, normal color. But there was something missing behind them, like looking at a photograph of a person instead of the person themselves. "Sure, whatever you need," he said. I knelt down in front of him, pulling out my pin light. "Look straight ahead, please. I'm gonna check your pupils." He stared forward. I shone the light in his right eye, then his left. His pupils constricted, a normal response. But his eyes didn't water, and he didn't blink. His eyes stayed fixed on a point over my shoulder. I counted in my head. 30 seconds, 40, a full minute. And the man still didn't blink. "Joseph, you can blink." He blinked immediately, like I had reminded him that he could even do that. How long have you been without water, Joseph?" I asked. "Don't know. A day, maybe." "But you're not thirsty?" "I'm fine." I checked his pulse then. 60 beats per minute. Somehow perfectly steady. Someone who had spent 2 nights in the wild would have an elevated heart rate. Stress, exhaustion, relief at being found. But his was calm, like someone just sitting on their couch. "Well, can you tell me what happened?" I asked. "How'd you get yourself lost?" "Went off trail, chasing a deer. Got confused." "You were chasing a deer?" "I wanted a photo." "For 2 days?" He blinked again, like, "Oh, let me remember to do that," kind of blink. "Lost my phone. Couldn't find the trail. Wandered." The way he spoke was so hollow, and his breath, there was something off about that too. It didn't fog in the cold air like everyone else's. I stood up. "Well, he's showing no signs of exposure. Vitals are stable. I'd like to get him down and do a more thorough check." "Sounds good," Tom said.
Let's pack up, Joseph. You feel okay to walk?
Yes. Joseph stood up. No trouble at all, no stiffness, no soreness, just straight up. A girl named Jessica, a younger volunteer, offered him a protein bar. You must be hungry. No, thank you. You haven't eaten in 2 days, right? I'm fine. We started the hike down then. Joseph walked in the middle of the group, flanked by Dave and Mark. I hung back with Sarah and watched. Do you think there's something off about this? I asked her quietly. She shrugged. The guy got lost and got lucky. Probably scared out of his mind but trying to play it cool. But it wasn't that. I'd seen scared hikers play tough, and this wasn't that. We'd been hiking about 20 minutes when I noticed how evenly Joseph was walking. That trail, as I said before, was rough and uneven, with rocks and roots and loose dirt. Everybody was watching their footing, occasionally stumbling, experienced SAR and volunteers. But Joseph moved like he was walking on flat ground, and not once did I see him stumble. He never adjusted his stride. It was like his feet found the perfect spot every single step without him even looking down. And he wasn't sweating. We were all sweating from the pace and the gear, everyone except Joseph. Joseph, I called. How's your energy? You need a break? He turned his head to look at me. Just his head, not his shoulders, and I swear it was about 10 degrees too far for a normal person to turn comfortably. I'm fine. Still, we should stop. Let everyone catch their breath. Tom waved us down. We gathered in a small clearing, everyone grabbing water and checking their gear. Joseph stood apart from the group. He was staring into the trees. Mark walked over to me, Bear pressing up against his leg. The dog won't go near him, he said quietly. Bear's been keeping maximum distance since we found him. I then moved over next to Joseph. Your wife's gonna be so glad to see you. No response. Joseph? He turned to face me then, rotating his whole body this time like he'd remembered that's how people move. Yes. I said your wife's gonna be glad to see you. Yes, she will be glad. Dave called out. All right, let's keep moving. Got about 3 miles to the trailhead. We walked, but I couldn't stop watching Joseph. The more I watched, the more wrong things I noticed. Even his shadow seemed weird. Maybe I was getting paranoid and staring too long and being too judgmental. But I swear to God it seemed to lag behind him slightly, like his shadow was struggling to keep up with his form. When he stepped over a log, his shadow seemed to flow over it instead of jumping, so to speak. We were maybe a mile from the trailhead when Mark's dog started to act up again. Bear pulled hard on the leash, trying to get away from Joseph. He was whining, the fur on his back standing up. Easy, Bear, Mark said. What's gotten into you? Joseph stopped walking and turned to look at the dog. Bear went silent instantly. Not calm though, but silent. His mouth was open and body tensed up, like he was still whining but without the sound. You okay, bud? Mark said, pulling Bear closer. He must be... Joseph smiled. The smile didn't touch his eyes. Dogs don't like me. Why is that? I asked. They can tell. Tell what? That I'm not right. The words hung in the air for a moment. Nobody spoke or replied to it. Then Joseph laughed, and it was a perfectly normal laugh, and he shook his head. I'm joking. I got bit by a dog when I was a kid. They pick up on the fear. But he wasn't afraid. There wasn't an ounce of fear in him, and the way he suddenly talked with emotion seemed so abrupt. We kept walking. Bear stayed silent until Joseph was 30 feet ahead. Then suddenly his whining came back full force.
The last half mile felt endless. The sun was high now, hot on our backs. Every time I looked at Joseph, my grandfather's words echoed in my head. You see your brother, your mother, your father, and something feels wrong. You run. Because it's not them anymore. But I couldn't run and I couldn't accuse him. Even I didn't fully believe the ideas in my head. We made it to the parking lot at 12:15 p.m. Joseph's truck was still there, keys still locked inside. Tom called his wife, letting her know we were bringing him to the medical center in Cortez for evaluation. This is standard procedure. Joseph didn't argue, and he didn't ask to go straight home. He nodded and climbed into the back of Sarah's patrol vehicle. I watched him through the window as we packed up our gear. He sat perfectly still, hands in his lap, staring straight ahead. Didn't fidget, didn't look around, but sat there. Hell of a lucky find, Dave said, clapping me on the shoulder. That guy could have died out there. Yeah, I said. Lucky. But luck had nothing to do with it. Whatever we found on that mountain, it wanted to be found. It had left that water bottle like a breadcrumb. It had waited for us, and now we were bringing it home. Sarah drove Joseph to the medical center, and I followed in my truck. The whole drive I kept thinking about calling my grandfather, but argued with myself if this really was the situation I thought it was. At the medical center, they did a full workup. I knew one of the nurses, Carla, from previous SAR operations. She was the one who took Joseph's vitals. It's so weird, she said to me quietly while Joseph was in the bathroom. Everything I checked was textbook the right number. Body temperature 98.6, and I checked several times with no fluctuation. She continued. Nobody's temperature is exact. It fluctuates, and his blood pressure too. Perfect 120/8 every single time. And his heart rate is exactly 60, like someone programmed ideal vitals into a computer. The doctor, though, didn't seem at all concerned. Everything came back normal, or better than normal. Perfect even. No signs of dehydration despite 2 days without water. No hypothermia despite freezing temperatures. No elevated stress hormones. You're very lucky, the doctor told Joseph. Most people don't fare so well after that kind of exposure. I'm fine, Joseph said. His wife arrived an hour later. Emily Bentley, schoolteacher, early 30s, long black hair in a braid. She rushed into the room crying and threw her arms around her husband. Oh my God, Joseph, I was so scared. I thought... She stopped, pulled back, and looked at his face. Joseph? I'm fine, he said. You look... She touched his cheek, and I saw her flinch slightly, like his skin was the wrong temperature, even though we had just checked. You look different. It's been a hard couple days. No, you look better, younger. Did they give you something? The doctor shook his head. Just fluids and observation. Emily stared at her husband, confused. Their 2 kids had come in with her, a girl about 8 years old and a boy around 6. They hung back by the door, not running to their father like you'd expect. The girl, Sophie, I heard Emily call her, actually took a step backward when Joseph looked at her. Daddy? The boy said uncertainly. Hello, Michael, Joseph said. The words were right, but the tone was wrong, overly formal. Emily noticed. I could see it in her face, but she pushed through it and smiled. Let's get you home. You must be exhausted. She hugged him again. This time I saw Joseph's arms come up and wrap around her, but the kids didn't hug him at all. They discharged Joseph an hour later. As they were leaving, I overheard Sophie whisper to her mother, Why does Daddy smell different? Shh,
honey. He's been lost in the woods for 2 days." I watched them drive away, Emily talking while Joseph stared out the window, the kids silent in the back seat. That should have been the end of it. Missing hiker found safe, everyone goes home, case closed. That night I stayed up sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop, searching for anything that might explain what I'd seen. I found Joseph's Facebook profile. His wife posted regularly. Family photos, school events, hiking trips. I scrolled back through months of posts. The Joseph in those photos was different than the person we'd found. The same face and same build, but something essential was missing from the man we'd brought down from the mountain. The Joseph in the photo smiled with his whole face, had laugh lines around his eyes, looked at his family with warmth. The thing we brought back home had none of that. Around 3 a.m., I gave up trying to rationalize it. I knew something was wrong. I thought about calling someone, Tom maybe, or my grandfather. But again, I didn't. I did nothing at all, and told myself I was being stupid. That being lost like that does different things to different people. Not everyone will handle it the same way. After all, Emily would have noticed if something was really wrong with her husband. Wouldn't have taken him home, right? I was wrong about that too. A few weeks later, I ran into Tom at the hardware store in Cortez. He was picking up fence posts. We made small talk for a few minutes about the weather and upcoming search operations. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Hey, you hear about the Bentley situation?" What situation?" "Well, the wife called the sheriff's office and said Joseph's been acting strange since we brought him back. Wandering around at night, standing in the kids' rooms while they sleep. She woke up at 2 a.m. last week and found him just standing at the foot of the bed, staring at her. Not moving, not blinking, just staring." "Jesus, what did the sheriff say?" Tom shrugged. "Not much they can do. Guy hadn't broken any laws. They suggested she get him to see a doctor, maybe check for a head injury we had missed. PTSD from being lost." He paused. Then he looked around to make sure no one else was listening. "Sarah did the wellness check, said Joseph seemed fine when she talked to him. Polite and cooperative, but she said something felt wrong. Said when she walked into that house it felt like walking into a meat locker. It was too cold. The heat wasn't on and the windows were all open in the middle of October. Kids were wearing winter coats inside." I wanted to tell him then, to say what I had been thinking, but the words stuck in my throat. "That's gotta be some kind of trauma," I managed. 2 days alone in the wilderness can mess with your head." "Yeah," Tom said, but he didn't sound convinced. "There's more, though. Emily told Sarah that Joseph doesn't really sleep anymore, just sits in a chair all night and faces the wall. He doesn't want to eat. She's tried everything, his favorite foods, takeout, even just soup. But he won't touch it. Says he's not hungry. It's been 2 weeks, Mason. 2 weeks without eating." Over the next few months, I heard things. Not directly. I wasn't close to the Bentley family, but through the small-town network. Stories that got stranger as time went on. Emily had taken the kids to stay with her sister in Farmington for a few weeks. When someone asked why, she said Joseph needed space to recover. But her sister, Maria, told people the real reason. The kids were terrified of their own father. Sophie had woken up one night to find Joseph standing in her doorway, smiling at her in the dark. Not a normal smile either, she claimed. When Emily asked him about it, he said he was just checking on his kids. But Sophie swore his eyes had been reflecting like a cat's eyes that night. Joseph had been fired from his job at the tribal administration office after 3 weeks. His coworker told me about it when I ran into him at the gas station. "Oh, it wasn't any one thing," Ben said. "Just everything was wrong. He'd sit at his desk for hours without moving.
Not working, not looking at his computer, just sitting there perfectly still. And the way he'd watch people, like he was studying them and learning them. Janet from accounting said she caught him at her desk one morning before anyone else got in. He'd been going through her personal photos. When she asked what he was doing, he said he was practicing. Practicing what? Practicing being normal. That's what he said, practicing being normal. Someone saw him walking along the highway at 3 a.m. one night, miles from his house. When the deputy stopped to check on him, Joseph said he was walking home, but that was the opposite direction of his house. About 6 months after the rescue, Emily brought the kids back home. I don't know what fully convinced her to come back. I can understand it though. She thought things would be better, that everything could go back to normal. But there was no going back to normal. A year passed, then another. I stopped thinking about it, and I guess the town did too, because I stopped hearing much about Joseph and the Binnelleys. Then on a Tuesday morning in November, my phone rang. It was Sarah.
Mason, you need to turn on the news.
I was getting ready for work with coffee in hand. Why? What's going on?
Just turn it on.
Her voice was shaking. I grabbed the remote. The local news was showing footage of a house fire, smoke billowing into the early morning sky, all black and thick. The banner at the bottom read, "Breaking, multiple fatalities in Cortez house fire." Then they showed the address. It was Joseph Binnelle's house. Jesus Christ, I whispered.
They're saying 3 dead. Emily and both the kids,
Sarah said.
And it wasn't from the fire. They had single gunshot wounds to the head while they were sleeping. Then someone set the house on fire.
Joseph?
He's gone. They found his truck in the driveway, but no sign of him. They've got dogs out looking, helicopters too, nothing yet.
The details came out over the next few days. The neighbors had heard nothing. No gunshots, no screams. The family had been dead for hours before the fire started. The search for Joseph went on for weeks. They brought in teams from 3 counties. They found human footprints, but they were barefoot and seemed to vanish right into nothing. Through the grapevine, I heard they found strips of what looked like human skin dangling from tree branches. But they never found Joseph. The investigation officially concluded that Joseph had suffered a psychotic break, killed his family, and fled into the wilderness. They assumed he was dead somewhere out there. Exposure, they said. Animals. The case went cold. I ended up moving to Albuquerque. I didn't feel like staying in that town anymore. But a while later, I got a call from Tom.
They found something,
he said. Tom, I really don't.
Just listen. They were doing a training exercise up near Sleeping Ute. New SAR volunteers teaching them grid search patterns. That same area where we found Joseph a few years ago.
My stomach was starting to knot up.
They found some human remains scattered over about 30 yards. Mostly bones, some clothing fragments, pretty heavily scavenged by animals.
He paused.
They ran DNA. Mason, it was Joseph Binnelle.
That's impossible. Joseph killed his family about 6 months ago. If he died out there...
No.
Tom interrupted.
You're not quite getting me. The ME looked at the remains, based on decomposition, weathering, insect activity, plant growth through the bones. He's estimating time of death at approximately 2.5 years ago.
I felt dizzy. What?
2.5 years, Mason. That places the age around when Joseph first went missing. Before we found him. Before we brought him back.
I couldn't speak.
They found his driver's license, his wedding ring. Everything checks out. If these remains are from 2.5 years ago, if Joseph Binnelle died up there when he first went missing, Then what the hell did we bring back from that mountain? What lived in that house for 2 years? What killed Emily and those kids?